owner of the US Mega Farmest video is Puremont para Intratnamiento Wino Infringe de Recos de Otra Aniles. Los de Recos de la Novela y la Imagen son del otro original, no reclama más propiedad. No te gusta esperar y quieres escuchar este fanfic completo ahora? Suscríbete a nuestro Patreon, donde encontrarás los mejores fanfics. Chapter 1051 The Mastermind. Introduce yourself. The bearded man's face froze, and then he smiled awkwardly. Sir, I don't know you. Really? Kinzu pulled the corner of his mouth and waved his hand casually. Take him away, and wait until he recognizes me. Understood, boss. Hearing Kinzu's words, Thomas certainly knew what to do, and took the bearded man away without saying anything. Half an hour later, what? Do you recognize me now? Kinzu's expression was still calm, but the bearded man could no longer stand up. He was dragged here by two bodyguards. I know him, feeling the pain in his body like a heart-piercing pain, the bearded man choked and said, Mr. Clean, it was the people from Yoshinoya who asked me to do this. Yoshinoya? Kinzu frowned. Japanese? Yes, it's Japanese. The bearded man nodded quickly. Tell me, what is their goal? Kinzu felt a little uneasy after knowing that it was the little dwarf from the island country who was targeting him. At the beginning, he really tricked them. Did they find out something? Mr. Clean, I really don't know what they want to do. The bearded man was afraid that Kinzu would not believe him, so he explained with a panic face. They just asked me to secretly purchase the catch from your fishery, and didn't say anything else. Really? Kinzu glanced at the bearded man lightly, waved his hand, and signaled Thomas to take the man away. Regardless of whether what this guy said was true or false, it would not prevent Kinzu from giving him a good beating. It must be said that some people are not honest if they are not punished. The bearded man, who didn't know anything at first, knew everything after being punished several times. It turned out that the reason why Yoshinoya attacked him was really for revenge. Not only did they let the bearded man secretly purchase the catch, but they also wanted to get in touch with several princes and prepare to take over the ranch. Although they didn't want to admit it, they had to admit that the cattle from Kinzu's ranch were comparable to the top wagyu from their island country. In the eyes of those little devils, the main reason why Kinzu could raise such good cattle was because of the good ranch. Otherwise, how could a college student who knew nothing raise better cattle than their old cowboys? However, what made Kinzu feel relieved was that these little devils wanted to cause trouble for him simply because they were cheated by Chainmew at the auction last time. It was not because they knew that Kinzu had stolen a ship of antiques from them. Hey, these little devils are really vengeful. Chainmew touched his nose awkwardly. He never thought that this matter was caused by himself in the end. Haha, isn't it normal for the little devils to have a strong sense of revenge? Kinzu smiled and shook his head. I just didn't expect them to be so patient. It took so long for them to take action. We were really caught off guard. What should we do now? Chainmew scratched his head. Yoshinoya is not easy to deal with. If there is no direct evidence, the court may not help us. Sue? Kinzu smiled. Why should we sue? It's better to be direct when dealing with such people. What do you mean? Chainmew seemed to have thought of something, and his expression was a little strange. Hilly. Kinzu ached to Komaizing, and after he came over, he whispered a few words. Boss, don't worry, I'll do it right away. Komaizing nodded gently, turned around and walked out without hesitation. After Komaizing left, Chainmew hesitated, but still asked. Boss, if we tear our faces apart now, it will not be a good thing for us. It's indeed not a good thing. Kinzu shrugged indifferently. But it's not a bad thing, is it? Chainmew was a little embarrassed. Okay, there's nothing to do here now, you can go back first. Kinzu smiled and waved his hand. The restaurant will be closed for a few days, saying that it will be renovated internally, and will open together with the new store after things here are done. Chainmew had no power to object to Kinzu's decision, and could only nod and agree helplessly. However, when it comes to the new store, he suddenly remembered something. Boss, the decoration of the new store is almost done. If we open the store at the same time, will the ingredients be available in time? Ingredients? Kinzu scratched his head. If it was before, he would dare to say that there would be no problem. After all, more than 1,000 cows were slaughtered before. Even if a restaurant sold a cow a day, it could be supplied for several months. But now, he is really not sure how much is left in the warehouse. Don't open the new store for the time being. Or find another supplier to replace it first. Chainmew suggested. No, open it normally, I'll find a way to deal with the ingredients. Although Chenmu's method is a good idea, Kinzu doesn't want to do it. Firstly, every day the store is postponed, a lot of rent will be lost. Secondly, delaying the opening of the store will make those who laugh at the joke think that they're afraid of them. For the enemy who provokes oneself, if it cannot be solved cleanly, it is very likely to cause unnecessary trouble. After Chenmu left with the bodyguards, Kinzu turned around and walked back to the villa. He can't leave now, there are still many things waiting for him to deal with. Boss, what should we do with these guys? Pointing at Simon and James, Dale pinched Kinzu's shoulders and asked, should I hand it over to Mr. Stella, or should I find a place to deal with them? Looking at Dale's calm look, Kinzu felt a little pain in his forehead. Why did this girl become so violent now? Let Stella deal with it. After all, it's not a big deal. There is no need to make so much trouble. Although Kinzu also wanted to teach these guys a lesson, he didn't plan to take their lives for the time being. There was no way. Although he could trust Dale, he couldn't trust guys like Connors. After sending Dale to deal with Simon and the others, Kinzu was not idle. He returned to his room and continued his new journey. He wanted to take over the fishery in the shortest time possible. Not to mention absolute domination, at least a simple food chain had to be formed. For example, big fish eat small fish. Yes, that's right, it's that simple, just stop them from killing each other. Not enough food? No problem, I'll solve it, whether it's fishing in other seas or directly scattering fish fry. Anyway, we can't let those guys starve. As long as these big fish are raised well, Kinzu believes that the value that the fishery can create for himself will definitely be much greater than before. No matter what, these are all things for the future. Now the most important goal is to lead the manta ray to kill all directions and help it complete the great cause of unification as soon as possible. Chapter 1052 of Smashed. The next morning, when Kinzu was still immersed in an indescribable dream, his cell phone suddenly rang. Who is it, so early in the morning? In order to help Yingguan complete the great cause of unification as soon as possible, he worked until almost dawn last night before going to bed. Unexpectedly, he was woken up by the phone after only 2 hours of sleep. Opening his eyes dazedly, Kinzu reached out to take the phone from the bedside table, and answered it directly without even looking at it. Boss, good news, good news. As soon as the call was connected, before Kinzu had time to speak, Chenmu's joyful voice came through the microphone. Good news. What good news? Kinzu was a little stunned. Is the restaurant fully decorated? Chenmu was choked, and smiled awkwardly. Not yet, but it will be soon, and it will be almost done in a week or two. Oh, what good news is that? Is my sister-in-law pregnant again? Not either. Chenmu's forehead was filled with black lines. What is going on? He didn't dare to let Kinzu guess anymore, and hurriedly said, Boss, it's Yoshinoya. Something happened at Yoshinoya. Yoshinoya. Kinzu's eyes lit up, and his expression became much more energetic. Tell me quickly, what happened there? It was smashed. Chenmu's voice was a little excited. Boss, you don't know, more than 10 Yoshinoya in the Boston area were all smashed last night. Oh? Do you know who did it? It's not certain yet, but it is said that it was done by a gang in the North District. I don't know if it's true or not. Gang forces. It seems that I still have to thank them. Kinzu raised the corner of his mouth slightly, revealing a smug smile. He didn't expect that Komi's action was so fast. Not only did he get it done in one night, but he also directed the trouble to the gang forces. Boss, although this is a good thing, we can't be too careless. Although Chenmu didn't know who was behind this incident, it didn't prevent him from preparing for a rainy day. The Japanese are not good people. If they can't find that culprit and target us, it will be no fun. Don't worry about that. I have asked Komis to arrange it. Kinzu smiled indifferently and said, I'm not afraid of them coming, I'm afraid of them not coming. As long as they dare to come for revenge, don't even think about going back. After listening to Kinzu's words, Chenmu was stunned for 2 seconds, and then he seemed to think of something, and his mouth suddenly couldn't close. Boss, you didn't do this, did you? Guess. Kinzu didn't admit or deny it. After speaking, he hung up the phone without waiting for Chenmu to react. Hello, hearing the busy tone coming from the microphone, Chenmu was a little amused. He hadn't finished what he was saying. Why did he hang up? However, thinking of Kinzu's last 2 words full of deep meaning, Chenmu was a little uneasy again. Could it be that the boss really did this? After hanging up the phone, Kinzu turned off his phone. He didn't want anyone to bother him again. But, man proposes, God disposes. Just when Kinzu was drowsy and just fell asleep, he was awakened by the sudden knock on the door. Brother, what time is it? Why are you still sleeping? Listening to the chattering of his little sister Kinru outside the door, Kinzu swallowed the dirty words on his lips. Well, it seems that I can't sleep in today. Kinzu sighed helplessly and had to get up and wash up. After a while, Kinzu, who had washed and changed his clothes, opened the door and looked at Kinru, who was chatting with Dale outside, and said unhappily, "Your little girl, don't you have classes today? Why did you come here? TSK, brother, are you living too comfortably these days?" Kinru shook her ponytail proudly and muttered a little dissatisfied. "Today is Sunday, why do you have classes?" Is it Sunday?" Kinzu touched his nose awkwardly. He didn't have to go to work or school, so he really didn't know what day of the week it was. You didn't even come to see me." Kinru looked at him with resentment. "If my sister-in-law hadn't told me, I wouldn't have known you were in Boston." This isn't brother busy?" Kinzu, who had wanted to settle accounts with this girl, quickly raised his hands and surrendered when he saw this. "Brother is wrong, I must go to see our little princess first next time, okay?" No sincerity. Kinru pouted and didn't buy it at all. Kinzu touched his chin. "How about this? When I'm done with my work, I'll take you shopping and eat delicious food. How about that?" "That? I can consider it." Hearing about eating delicious food, Kinru couldn't help but narrow her eyes and swallowed involuntarily. Although Sayu didn't treat her badly during the day she came to Boston, she seldom went out for big meals in order to maintain her figure. Kinzu breathed a sigh of relief when he saw this. He didn't give Kinru more time to think about it. He made the decision directly. "Okay, let's make a happy decision. Let's go for a big meal later." "Brother, you can't take me alone." Blinking, Kinru said with a smile. "Sister Sayu is still waiting for your call at home." Kinzu looked at his younger sister with some doubts. "Since Sayu is also at home, why don't you come together? She's a girl." Kinru glared at Kinzu unhappily. "You didn't call her when you came, and she thought you hated her. How dare you come? Is it that serious?" Kinzu was a little speechless. Why is this woman so troublesome? However, after thinking about it carefully, what Kinru said made some sense. After all, she was helping him take care of the little girl, but he didn't even call her. It was indeed a bit wrong. After hesitating for a moment, Kinzu picked up his phone and called Sayu. It seemed that she had been guarding her phone all the time. The call was connected as soon as she called. Hearing the soft voice with a hint of joy on the other side, Kinzu couldn't help but feel a little itchy in his heart. He had been busy since he came to Boston for several days, and he didn't think about that matter much. But now listening to Sayu's voice, inexplicably, a ripple appeared in Kinzu's heart. However, this ripple was extinguished by the little girl's words. "By the way, brother, my sister-in-law called me yesterday and asked me to come and look after you." Kinru blinked her big eyes. "Look after me?" Kinzu was a little confused. "Yes." Kinru nodded affirmatively. "My sister-in-law said that she was a little worried about you being alone outside, so she asked me to look after you to prevent you from messing around outside." Did she really say that?" Kinzu's face looked a little weird. "Of course." Kinru nodded firmly. "Then why did you ask me to call Sayu?" Kinzu rolled his eyes. "Aren't you trying to make me make a mistake on purpose?" Kinru pinched the corner of her clothes a little embarrassedly. "It's okay, Sister Sayu is one of us anyway." Chapter 1053 The Role of the US Dollar. The sunset in the evening was like a flaming cloud, densely covering the sky over Boston, looking particularly gorgeous. However, as Yoshinoe's regional manager in the United States, Yoshino Ryoji was a little irritated at the moment. More than a dozen stores in the bustling area of Boston were smashed at the same time, and many store managers and franchisees were admitted to the hospital. Even the tasks assigned by the headquarters were deadlocked. This sudden storm made Yoshino Ryoji, a little old man over 50 years old, feel overwhelmed. "Bagger, Nakagawa-kun, haven't you found out who did it yet?" In a magnificently decorated office, Yoshino Ryoji, sitting in the boss chair, stared fiercely at the middle-aged man standing in front of him. "Hi, Yoshino-sama." Shinichiro Nakagawa, who had a 3/7 split hair, bent down neatly and assured with a solemn promise. "We already have clues and are currently identifying the murderer." I believe there will be a result soon. Yoshi. Nodding with satisfaction, Yoshino Lingchai felt relieved. Nakagawa-tung, the headquarters attaches great importance to this matter. I hope you can come up with a result as soon as possible, so that you can atone for your sins. Do you understand? Hi. With his legs together, Shinakaro Nakagawa said with a flushed face. Please rest assured, Yoshino-sama, we will find the murderer in less than 3 days. When Kinzu was wandering around Bosman with his little sister, the underground world of Bosman was already surging. Although Yoshinoya's main business was just to run a restaurant and did not involve any low-level forces, when the money reached a certain level, it was also very simple to do something. $5 million. No one can afford to be with the Green Franklin. When Yoshinoya took out $5 million, the leader of the North District Anjui, who was the first suspect, was shot dead on the spot. These guys seem to be really anxious. Sitting in the rest area of a shopping mall, Kinzu hung up Chain Mu's phone call, and a gloating expression appeared on his face. Who did this? Others don't know, but Kinzu doesn't know. The North District Anjui? That was just a scapegoat found by Kumis. But now, the group of dwarfs in Yoshinoya actually killed the leader of the Anjui. Not only did they kill him, but they did it so openly. This is so interesting. Perhaps in their opinion, this can kill the chicken to scare the monkey, and it can have a deterrent effect on other gang forces. But in Kinzu's opinion, this is no different from courting death. After thinking about it, Kinzu took the opportunity when Kinro and Masayu went to the toilet and picked up his mobile phone to call Kumis. Kumis, do you know about the Anjui? Yes, I just received the news. Kumis thought Kinzu was worried that Yoshinoya would find out about them, so he couldn't help but say with a smile. Boss, don't worry, this matter will never be found out about us. Kumis, of course I trust you to do things, but that's not what I mean. Kinzu showed a sneer at the corner of his mouth. Since Yoshinoya intends to kill the chicken to scare the monkey, then we might as well add fuel to the fire. Boss, what do you mean? Kumis was a little confused. Kinzu didn't rush to answer, but asked. The boss of the Anjui is dead. Isn't there anyone who wants to take revenge? There should be, right? Kumis was a little uncertain. Logically speaking, if the boss is dead, if the people under him want to take over this power, they will definitely think about revenge first. But the problem is that the Anjui is just a small power, and the profit of the entire gang is only $10,000 or $20,000 a month. And Yoshinoya, it is a multinational group that can easily spend millions of dollars. Who would be willing to defend such a giant for that little money? No, they will take revenge, they will. Kinzu laughed a little evilly. Kumis, go to Anjui, who can help their boss to take revenge, I will give him $1 million. Kumis, who was still a little confused, was stunned when he heard it. Boss, is this too troublesome? If you want to get rid of those dwarfs in Yoshinoya, I can get rid of them today. No, Kumis, you don't understand. Kinzu shook his head. It's too unskilled to do it directly, and it's easy for people to find out. If it's the people from Anjui who do it, others won't think so much. Okay, then I'll go there in a while. With a sigh, Kumis hung up the phone with some disappointment. $1 million? It's really cheap for those guys. If Kinzu hadn't insisted, Kumis really wanted to do it himself and then intercept the $1 million. However, thinking of Kinzu's last promise, a fierce smile appeared on Kumis's face again. In the early morning, the rising sun reflected on the sea level, dazzling. On the small dock of Revere, a silver-white fiberglass fishing boat slowly moved. Kinzu, standing on the deck of the fishing boat, looked at the calm sea surface, and his heart was inexplicably calm. Recently, things in the fishery have come one after another. Although he didn't take it seriously, he was still a little irritated after a long time. Of course, the reason why he went out to sea today was not to relax, but to go to the seedling farm in New York to purchase some fish fry. Yes, he was going to purchase fish fry. Although there are many sea fish in the fishery, they are all big ones. Whether they are eaten or caught and sold, Kinzu is a little reluctant. What's more, with the help of the manta ray Silverlight to help him conquer the city during this period, these big guys are basically under his control. Kinzu suddenly couldn't bear to do anything to them. Of course, this is just the superficial reason. As for the real reason, the ocean is so big, he also wants to see it. Well, Kinzu had to admit that when people have power in their hands, their ideas will change. Before this, he just wanted to get rid of those big guys who came in uninvited. But after he had the ability to control them, he changed his mind again. It is not easy for these deep-sea fish to grow to such a large size. It is really a waste to deal with them like this. In this case, it is better to recycle the waste and use them to open up the sea. Who stipulated that the area of the fishing ground can only be so large? Can't such a vast area of the ocean become a natural fishing ground? Bluefin tuna is precious. Yellowfin tuna is valuable. So what? As long as he needs it, he can command the fish to drive them over any time and anywhere. Thinking about it, Kinzu suddenly felt a little excited. As long as he collected a few more pets in the ocean, wouldn't this mysterious ocean have no secrets for him? Shipwrecked treasures, precious plants, rare fish, unknown creatures, what do these count for? Si est escuchando esta novela en un canal distinto a mundo fanfic novelas, significat lo descarga and y subieron sinis fuerzos invitamos cordialmente a visitar nuestro canal. Mundo fanfic novelas all encontras la versión original de esta historia y podrás explorar muchas otras novelas de diversos narradores. Te esperamos para sumergirte en un mundo de novelas increíbles. Chapter 1054 I Want It All. Hot sun, light breeze. Kinzu strolled on the streets of Manhattan. His heart was as hot as the weather in New York. It had been 3 days since he left Boston for New York, and those guys finally took action. Just now, more than a dozen Yoshinoya restaurants in Boston were smashed again, and this time the smash was more thorough than the last time commerce took action. He could already imagine how exciting the face of the person in charge of Yoshinoya would be when he got the news. Killing the chicken to scare the monkey? This time I will show you what it means to fight to the death. Moreover, this is just the beginning. Clean, what are you thinking about? So obsessed. Just when Kinzu was thinking a little deeply, a pleasant voice suddenly came from his side. No, nothing, just some things about the fish farm. Turning around, seeing the 2 women, one big and one small, staring at him closely, Kinzu couldn't help but feel a little embarrassed. Christine, are you done shopping? Holding Shirley's hand, walking beside Kinzu, looking at his increasingly tall figure, Christine muttered a little resentfully. You don't even accompany us in, what's there to shop for? This? Kinzu looked up at the women's underwear store next to him, and was a little speechless. Is this woman a little bold now? Shirley is still beside her. Fortunately, Shirley didn't seem to be interested in their conversation. She just held their hands with her own hands, one on the left and one on the right, and walked leisurely on the bustling streets in the afternoon sun. To outsiders, this is a warm family of 3. No one would have thought that there would be a Hollywood star among them. Clean, when are you going to leave this time? Glancing at Kinzu's gaze, Christine seemed to have reacted. After her pretty face blushed slightly, she chuckled and changed the subject. Should we stay here for another 2 days? Kinzu was a little uncertain. So anxious. Christine frowned. Although they had just separated for less than a month, Kristen still felt uncomfortable when she thought about this man leaving again. Well, I can't help it. Things at the fishery are a bit complicated. Kinzu shrugged with a wry smile. Although he also enjoyed this quiet life, there were still a lot of things waiting for him to deal with in Boston. Besides, even if he left Boston, he would definitely go back to the ranch first. After all, there was not only Zumengyo there, but also Mobica and the other 2 girls. Fishing farm? Is it troublesome? Kristen raised her eyebrows subconsciously. Did those newly opened restaurants steal your business? Oh, you know that too? Kinzu looked at the woman next to him in surprise. This incident happened not long ago, and who else except those in the industry could notice such a small matter? After all, there was no real fight. Yeah, I heard Duck talk about it. Nodding, Christine asked worriedly, is it troublesome? It's not troublesome, the main thing is that I have to find out the mastermind behind the scenes. The mastermind? Isn't this just stealing business? Well, how should I put it? After finally coming out, Kinzu was not going to talk about these things, but seeing Christine's concerned eyes, he still briefly talked about the matter. Why are these Japanese people so annoying? After understanding the whole thing, Christine's heart was finally put down, but instead, it was replaced by disdain for Yoshinoya. Clean, you must teach them a lesson, it's so hateful. Don't worry, I will definitely not let them have an easy time. Christine's indignant look made Kinzu a little funny. It was the first time he saw this female star hate someone so much. After accompanying the 2 of them to stroll around Manhattan for an afternoon and finding a Chinese restaurant with a good reputation for dinner, Kinzu drove them back to their villa in New York. Although Kinzu wanted to stay in the simple but European and American villa, he gritted his teeth and left after seeing Shirley. There was no way. The little girl was not young anymore. Kinzu really couldn't do some things in front of her. The next day, early in the morning, after 3 days of wandering around New York, Kinzu seemed to have finally remembered what he was here for. After breakfast, he led Dale and his group to a seed farm in the suburbs. "Ha, Mr. Clean, you're still in great shape after so long." Because they had contacted each other in advance, and Kinzu's purchases were quite large, when they arrived at the seed farm, there were already 2 people waiting for them at the door. One of them was a middle-aged white man with blonde hair and pigtails. When Kinzu got out of the car, he greeted him enthusiastically. "Hey, I didn't expect you still remember me after so long." After shaking hands with the middle-aged white man in front of him, Kinzu asked in surprise. If he remembered correctly, this middle-aged white man with pigtails was the salesman who received him last year. However, what made Kinzu a little embarrassed was that the reason he had an impression of this guy was because of his pigtails. As for this guy's name and surname, he really didn't know. "Ha, Mr. Keen is so handsome, how can I forget him even if I have only met him once?" As if he saw the embarrassed expression on Kinzu's face, the middle-aged white man laughed and introduced. "Mr. Clean, I'm Jill, the sales director of this seed farm, and the one next to you is our general manager, Mr. Maxwell." "Mr. Jill, Mr. Max, hello." Nodding slightly at the 2 guys, Kinzu looked at the time and said with a smile, "It's getting late, let's go directly to pick the fry." Jill, who originally wanted to get close to Kinzu, nodded hurriedly and said, yes, let's go directly to pick the fry." There is no way, for a fish fry farm, a large fish farm owner like Kinzu is simply God. Especially in a city like New York that relies on tourism and finance for development rather than vigorously developing local fisheries, a fish fry farm must hold on to the few fish farm owners if it wants to survive. However, what Jill couldn't understand was why Kinzu, a big fish farm owner, always stared at those cheap fish fry. Could it be that this guy was an outsider? He couldn't recognize what kind of fish these fry were. After hesitating for a moment, seeing that Kinzu didn't seem to have any intention of leaving, Jill couldn't help but step forward a few steps and whispered, "Mr. Clean, these are some fish fry with relatively low economic value. Let's go in and take a look." "Huh? These are all cheap." Kinzu turned his head to look at Jill, and when he saw him nod affirmatively, he immediately laughed. "That's great, I'll take them all." "Ah? What?" I said, "I want all these kinds of fish fry." Ignoring Jill's weird look, Kinzu looked at the small fry in the fry farm and was very happy. He came here mainly to find food for those guys. Why did he need such good fish fry? As long as we buy these fish fry and keep them for a month or 2, the big fish in our own fish farm will no longer have to worry about food. Chapter 1055. The end of Yoshino Ryoji. After staying in the fish fry farm for more than half an hour, when Kinzu and his party came out, Jill and Maxwell had some strange expressions on their faces. Especially Maxwell, he didn't expect that the person the general manager of the fish fry farm, would come to buy cheap fish fry. How could this not make people angry? But now that he was angry, Maxwell couldn't get angry. There was no way, although they bought cheap fish fry, they bought a lot. Just because of the work all included, he couldn't neglect them. You know, although his fish fry farm is not big, if he bought all the fish fry, it would cost millions of dollars. "Manager Max, what do you think they buy these cheap fish fry for?" Watching Kinzu and his party disappear in front of him, Jill hesitated for a long time and asked the doubts in his heart. "What's the use? How would I know?" Maxwell shrugged and walked in, muttering, "Maybe they buy it to feed the fish." "That's impossible." Wiping the cold sweat from his forehead, Jill smiled bitterly and said, "Although our fish fry are cheap, they are much more expensive than feed. Moreover, if the survival rate is not high, the average will be even more frightening. Who knows what rich people think?" After solving the problem of fish fry, Kinzu's mission in New York was completed. However, this does not mean that he will go back. After all, purchasing fish fry is just a small matter and can be solved online. The main purpose of his coming here is to stay away from the storm circle in Boston. After all, Boston has not been peaceful these days. Just as he guessed, when Yoshino's regional manager Yoshino Ryoji rushed to the scene and looked at the ruined store, he almost died of anger. The group of people from the Yamjiu didn't deliberately hide their whereabouts, or they didn't know how to hide their whereabouts at all, so before coming, Yoshino Lingchai knew who did it. But it was precisely because he knew who did it that Yoshino Lingchai reacted so strongly. It was a slap in the face, it was really a slap in the face. He just killed the boss, thinking that these guys would surrender and beg for mercy, and he even prepared a celebration banquet. But now, surrender. Looking at the restaurant in front of him that looked like it had been demolished, Yoshino Lingchai felt his old face burning, and he hated the group of people from the Yanjiu to death. However, before he could find trouble with the group of people from the Yanjiu, they had already taken action. Kinzyu's task for Komis was to get rid of the person in charge of Yoshinoya. Komis also clearly told the people from the Yanjiu that only by getting rid of the person in charge of Yoshinoya could they get $1 million. Therefore, when Yoshino Lingchai was still running around to comfort the frightened store managers and employees, his fate was already doomed. Boom! A violent explosion sounded suddenly, and Yoshino Ryoji, who was sitting in the car, was also shaken. Mr. Nakagawa, what's going on in front? Feeling uneasy for no reason, Yoshino Ryoji subconsciously shrank his head and dared not stick his head out again. Mr. Yoshino, it is said that there was a car crash. I will go down to take a look. Shinakaro Nakagawa, who was holding the walkie-talkie, whispered a few words, opened the car door and walked down. Car crash? How can there be such a loud noise? He muttered in confusion. Although he wanted to go out to take a look, the inexplicable fear in his heart still made him stay in the car honestly. However, what surprised him was that after a long time, Shinakaro Nakagawa still didn't come back. Bagger, what is this guy Nakagawa doing? Although he didn't know where the uneasiness in his heart came from, Yoshino Ryoji was still a little irritable. He wanted to close his eyes for a while, but he didn't feel sleepy at all. You go and see what's going on. If you can't find a way, take a detour. After waiting for a while, Nakagawa Shinakaro still didn't come back. Yoshino Lingchai became more annoyed and sent the driver away. There were only 3 people in the car, and now that 2 of them left, he was the only one left. Yoshino Lingchai felt even more uneasy. He wanted to call the bodyguard back, but he opened his mouth and couldn't say it. It was broad daylight and on the street. What was he afraid of? What if others misunderstood him as a coward? Then his rating in the family would be lowered. Just when Yoshino Lingchai was hesitating whether to call the bodyguard back, 2 people suddenly rushed out from nowhere, opened the car door directly, and threw a bundle of things in. What is this? After looking through it with some confusion, Yoshino Lingchai's eyes suddenly became straight, and his pupils contracted rapidly. Bagaboom! Along with Yoshino Ryoji's desperate wail, an explosion louder than before suddenly resounded through the sky. Mr. Cummings, we have completed the mission. Look at this. In a hidden residential building in Boston, 3 young men with red eyes and somewhat ugly faces looked at Cummings with hope. Don't worry, you'll get it. Looking at them expressionlessly, Cummings whispered a few words into the earphones, and then said, the money is ready and can be given to you at any time, but you should understand the rules. I don't want to hear anything back outside. Of course, Mr. Cummings, don't worry. Although his eyes were full of bloodshot and his spirit was a little sluggish, the leading black youth still nodded seriously. We will leave here after getting the money, and we will definitely not leave any trouble. I hope so. Shrugging his shoulders, Cummings threw a box directly in front of the 3 people, then stood up and walked out. I'll give you the money. If I hear anything bad, I don't mind feeding you all to sharks. The 3 young men sitting around the table didn't dare to move until Cummings left. There was no way. Although they claimed to be gang members, they were still far behind the mercenaries who kill people without blinking an eye. After Cummings disappeared completely, a young man hurriedly took the suitcase. After opening it, he looked at the stacks of Franklins inside that still smelled of ink. Although his hands were shaking with excitement, he still asked carefully, Big brother, why don't they do it themselves? He had been holding this question in his mind for a long time. He was very clear about the strength of those mercenaries. It was not difficult to kill the target without anyone noticing. Maybe, it's because someone needs to bear the consequences. The black young man in the lead swallowed his saliva and looked away with some difficulty. Although they can kill the target without anyone noticing, it doesn't mean that the other party will accept their fate. If they find out one day, it will be a troublesome matter. But if we did it, it would be different. Chapter 1056. The fisherman worried about gains and losses. The blue sea and sky, the cool breeze. On the vast sea, several small boats whizzed by, leaving silver-white water lines behind them. Today's weather was good, and there were not too many winds and waves on the sea, so Kinzu, who had just brought back the first batch of fish fry, started to spread them directly. He was originally going to use a helicopter, but fishermen are not cowboys, and there are really few people here who can fly. Thinking that there were not many fish fry, it would be troublesome to rent someone else's, so he simply let a few guys drive small boats. Anyway, they were idle anyway, so they couldn't waste food. Boss, this batch of fish fry is not small, but, on the dock, Will, who had just finished spreading a boat of fish fry, walked over while wiping his hands. His face looked a little strange. Just what? Kinzu took a cup of coffee that Dale had just ground, took a sip, and his eyes still didn't leave the small boat working on the sea. Nothing, I just think it's a bit of a waste to raise this kind of fish in our fishery. While talking, Will had been secretly looking at Kinzu's face. Seeing that he had no expression, his heart sank immediately, and even his voice became much quieter. There was no way. As a person who had just made a mistake, Will now even had the urge to run away when facing Kinzu, let alone to refute him. Hehe, you mean, these fish are too cheap? Even if Will didn't say it clearly, Kinzu could understand what he meant, and smiled and shook his head. I know what kind of fish to raise, you don't have to worry about it, just help me to watch out for someone who comes to the fishery to steal fish. Hearing Kinzu say this, Will seemed to understand something, sighed a little sadly, and continued to work after agreeing. As for Kinzu, although he felt that this guy might have misunderstood his meaning, he had no good excuse to explain. Should I tell him the truth? Don't be ridiculous. No matter how much Will believes in Kinzu, he will not believe that he can build a large army under the sea to help him attack the city. What will happen then? Monster. Will, how is it? Have you told the boss? As soon as Will went down, a fisherman came over to inquire about the news. As a member of the fishery, as an old fisherman who used to go fishing with Kinzu, they still have some feelings for the fishery. Even if Simon's incident happened, it didn't affect them much. Therefore, seeing that Kinzu brought such a bunch of cheap fish fry, they thought their boss was cheated, so they planned to ask Will, the person in charge of the fishery, to ask about the situation. However, they didn't expect to receive such a reply. Will, did the boss really say that? Patience was a little unbelievable. If you don't believe it, go ask it yourself. Will shrugged helplessly. Forget about this. Turning his head to look at Kinzu on the dog, Patience was a little scratching his head. If Kinzu said this to Will, the head of the fishery, then there would be nothing to say to him, a soldier. Will, do you think we are about to lose our jobs? After a moment of silence, Patience asked bigly. Maybe. Will sighed and did not refute. Kinzu's attitude today made the old fisherman feel a little uneasy. Although he said that he did not blame himself, he did not say that he would continue to use him. Damn Simon, he has ruined me this time. Seeing Will's performance, Patience could not help but curse in a low voice. For that current job, both Will and Patience cherish it very much. There is not much work to do, but the money earned is not bad. Occasionally, they go out to sea and get subsidies, which are even more enviable. But now, just because of Simon alone, the boss no longer trusts their entire team. It is simply an unprovoked disaster. However, Kinzu has no time to care about what these guys are thinking now. He is very busy. Well, not just ordinary busy. When Will led people to spread fish fry everywhere, he was commanding Yingguang and leading his group of dense sea fish army to clear this sea area. It's not that Kinzu really values this batch of fry. He mainly wants them to grow up smoothly and reproduce as soon as possible. Otherwise, there won't be enough to eat. Fortunately, although there are quite a few fry, it's not too many. In addition, Kinzu specifically told Will to just scatter the fry nearby, which is not too difficult to do. Before Will and his team finished their work, Kinzu finally turned this sea area into a fish-free zone with silver light. No, it should be said that there is no big fish zone. In the entire sea area, except for the more than 100,000 small fry that were just scattered, there is not even a single fish, which guarantees the survival rate of these fry to the greatest extent possible. Now it's good. After all the tossing and turning, the small fry, which were a little sluggish, entered the sea and found that their safety was not threatened. They immediately relaxed and adapted to the current environment in the shortest time. So, when Kinzu shifted his thoughts to Yingguang and came to this sea area for inspection, he saw the small fish fry gathered together and happily scurried around among the reefs. Of course, it doesn't mean that all dangers have been eliminated. From what Kinzu saw, because they were too excited or too curious about unknown species, many small fish fry would actively surround the crabs on the seabed. Inevitably, the harassed generals only need to raise their claws slightly to injure or maim. This is not to say that the crabs are very accurate, but mainly because there are too many small fish fry, and they often move in groups. Kinzu didn't pay attention to these small accidents. After turning around and finding that there was no problem, he shifted his thoughts back. Well, I'm going back first. I'll trouble you at the fishery. Looking at the time, Kinzu waved to Will, who was still busy here. Will was a little stunned. Didn't the boss plan to change people now? Don't forget to throw some seaweed in later. Thinking about the situation of the young fish fry looking for food everywhere, Kinzu smiled and said, feed them more frequently these days, the little guys are growing. Oh. Okay. Awakened by Kinzu's voice, Will didn't care to think too much, and nodded repeatedly. He didn't come back to his senses until Kinzu's figure could no longer be seen. Will, what does the boss mean? Kinzu's voice was loud, and the busy people on the sea heard it. As soon as he left, Patience immediately dragged the boat to Will's side. He said that he would hand over the fishery to us. Does he not plan to change people? Well, I don't know. Will, who has always been mature and prudent, was a little confused at this moment. He really couldn't figure out what Kinzu was thinking. If he said he had no objection to them, why didn't he even discuss with them what fish to raise? And ask them not to ask anything? But if he said he had an objection, what did it mean to just hand over the fishery to them? Could this be a test from the boss? Chapter 1057 Zumengyo returns to China. Hurrah, hurrah, the shrill sirens echoed in the back streets of Boston. While Yoshinoya was leaderless and in chaos, Kinzu handed over the rest of the matter to the Boston Police Department. Logically speaking, Yoshinoya's behavior was at most commercial competition, and the police station would not accept this case. But who let them make a big deal out of it? Although the boss of the NGO was a gang member, he was a legal resident of the United States after all. How could he just disappear like that? Therefore, after receiving reports from the enthusiastic masses and complaints from Kinzu, a billionaire, the investigation was quickly launched. Of course, these have nothing to do with Kinzu. After sowing that fry in the fish farm, he said hello to his younger sister, Christine and others, and returned directly to the ranch. Because Zumengyo was going back to China. When Kinzu came out of the airport, it was already past 8 o'clock in the evening, and the stars in the night sky could not cover up his slightly heavy mood. Why? Why did he suddenly want to go back to China? Could it be that she was stimulated by Mobika and Donnie being at the ranch? On the phone, Zumengyo just said that she wanted to go back, and didn't say why. This made Kinzu, who already felt that he owed her, feel even more guilty. He was thinking wildly all the way, wondering how to deal with it. However, when Kinzu returned to the ranch by helicopter and saw Zumengyo standing at the door to greet him with a smile, he instantly threw everything behind his mind. Wife, what's wrong? Why do you suddenly want to go back to China? I don't know. To Kinzu's surprise, Zumengyo was also a little confused about why she wanted to go back to China. My mother called me and asked me to go back, saying that there seemed to be something going on at home and everyone had to be there. Is someone getting married? Kinzu couldn't help but guess. I don't know, but it shouldn't be. Zumengyo shook her head. If it's a happy event, my mother would have told me directly. Forget it, who cares? Since we are going back, let's talk about it when we get back. After thinking about it for a long time and still not being able to figure it out, Kinzu simply gave up thinking about it. When are you going back? I'll have someone book a plane ticket and we'll go back together. No, I couldn't go back alone. Shaking her head, Zumengyo glanced at the villa behind her with a smile. It's rare for Mobika to come here. Why are you always running around outside? Stay at home with them for a few days. I'll go back and see them and come back. Kinzu opened his mouth and didn't know what to say. It's natural to accompany his wife back to China. But is it really necessary to leave these two women on the ranch? Is it appropriate? After all, it's not possible to return to China in a day or two. What if you stay at home for 10 days or half a month? How can you tell them? Okay, I'll go back by myself. Although a little disappointed, Zumengyo still smiled and waved her hand. It's definitely nothing to go home, so you don't have to worry about my safety. Besides, we haven't gotten married yet. If there's something going on at home, it won't be convenient for you to go. Looking at Zumengyo's sweet smile, Kinzu felt a warm current in his heart, and he stretched out his hand to embrace the beauty in front of him. Wife, you're so nice. Being hugged by Kinzu in front of so many people, Zumengyo trembled all over and felt a little shy, but when she heard his almost whispering voice, her body softened again. I'm not good, what can I do? I'm sorry. Don't say sorry, I'm sorry for you, who made me useless. As she said that, the smile on Zhu Mengyo's face disappeared, and her eyes became a little red. If there was no problem with her body, how could she tolerate her man having another woman? But she couldn't do it. As a traditional Chinese woman, she couldn't give birth to a child for her man. This was her lifelong pain. Wife, don't cry. Qin Zhu was a little panicked when he accidentally found the tears accumulated in Zhu Mengyo's eyes, and he hurriedly wiped them for her. Don't cry, I will accompany you back to China, please don't cry. No, as long as you have this intention. After wiping the tears from the corners of her eyes, she felt much better when she saw Qin Zhu's concerned expression. I have already booked the plane ticket for tomorrow at noon, and you can just take me to the airport then. Are you in such a hurry? Qin Zhu was a little depressed. He had decided to go back with Zhu Mengyo, but he didn't expect that this girl had even booked the plane ticket. It's not that he couldn't refund and buy a new ticket, but Qin Zhu is not a Chinese citizen now, and he needs to apply for a visa to go to China. He can't catch tomorrow's flight anyway. Okay, it's settled. Go in and wash up. The meal is ready. Fortunately, Mobika and Donnie didn't understand Chinese very well. Although they were a little curious about the two of them crying and laughing, they didn't ask much. They just waited quietly by the side. Although Qin Zhu saw them, he couldn't say anything since he was holding Zhu Mengyo. He nodded at them and walked into the villa. Just as Zhu Mengyo said, dinner was ready, and they knew that Qin Zhu would be back today and were waiting for him. However, a table full of delicious food couldn't bring a good mood. Neither Qin Zhu nor Zhu Mengyo had much appetite. The host and hostess were not in a good mood, and the others were not in a good mood either. They ate a few bites in a hurry and then went to sleep. The next morning, Qin Zhu accompanied Zhu Mengyo to the airport. Looking at her figure gradually disappearing at the boarding gate, he felt melancholy. Boss, what about Mr. Doug? Do we still need to go now? Seeing that Qin Zhu was in a bad mood, although she didn't know why, Dale was still a little cautious when asking this question. Doug. Qin Zhu was stunned for a moment when he heard this, and then he remembered that this guy had called him a few days ago, and it seemed that his plane was being tested. However, Qin Zhu was really in no mood to toss and turn at this time, so he simply waved his hand. Please call me back and tell them that I have something to do these 2 days. I won't go to the test flight. Okay, boss. Nodding, Dale looked at the time and asked again. Where are we going now? Back to the ranch? Qin Zhu was a little confused when Dale asked this. Standing at the airport gate, looking at the people coming and going, he felt as if he had lost his goal. When Zhu Mengyo was there, no matter how busy he was, no matter where he was, he knew to go home. He always had a concern in his heart, knowing that there was a woman waiting for him. But when Zhu Mengyo left, he was a little confused. Where should he go? The ranch villa? But is that his home? From the time he moved here till now, Qin Zhu could say that he didn't even know how many rooms there were in the villa. Women. There were women in the ranch villa, but he also had women in New York. If he wanted women, he could find women in Billings. Why did he have to go back? Ding-ling-ling, the harsh ringing of the phone woke Qin Zhu up from his confusion. Looking at the familiar number, he hesitated for a moment, not knowing whether he should answer it. Chapter 1058 Zhu Mengyo's request. In the early morning, the dazzling sunlight penetrated the thick embroidered curtains and quietly slipped into the luxuriously decorated bedroom. On the soft and spacious bed, Qin Zhu rubbed his sleepy eyes and leaned against the head of the bed with a dazed look. Zhu Mengyo had been back for 3 days and had no news. In these 3 days, not only did no phone calls come in, but even when he took the initiative to call her, the prompt was the harsh shutdown prompt tone. What is this girl doing lying on the ground? Putting down the phone, Qin Zhu pulled his hair in annoyance. He was not worried that Zhu Mengyo would get into trouble. Not to mention the power of the Zhu family and Yanjin, the 2 female bodyguards he arranged for her were enough to deal with many things. Qin Zhu did not believe that there could be a criminal in the capital of China that could prevent the 2 female bodyguards from even getting any news out. However, the fact now is that in these 3 days, no news came out from either Zhu Mengyo or the female bodyguards. Ding-ling-ling, the harsh ringtone sounded, which was particularly prominent in this quiet bedroom. Qin Zhu, whose thoughts were interrupted, picked up his phone and looked at the caller ID. His expression became better. How is it? Dale, have you got your visa? Yes, it's done. Boss, I'll be at the ranch soon. Have you prepared your things? I'll be there soon. Let's go when you get there. After hanging up the phone, Qin Zhu quickly got up, changed clothes and washed up. When everything was over, Dale just arrived at the door. However, looking at the tired look on Qin Zhu's face, she frowned slightly and suggested, "Boss, the flight is in 2 hours, and the time is not tight. You should eat something before leaving." "Really? Okay." After a moment of hesitation, Qin Zhu touched his stomach and realized that he seemed to have not eaten for 2 meals. Since he had decided to go back to China, Qin Zhu temporarily put aside his worries and went to the kitchen to cook 2 bowls of noodles. After filling his stomach, he rushed to the airport with Dale. "Boss, I don't think you need to worry too much." On the way, seeing Qin Zhu looking out the window without saying a word, Dale had a headache. While driving, she comforted him. "No news, it only means that they are not convenient to contact you now. Even if you go, it will probably be the same result." "I know what you said." Qin Zhu nodded gently, moved his eyes away from the unchanging color outside the window, and sighed helplessly. "But I can't get any news, and I can't calm down. Even if I can't find them, at least I can ask her friends for news." At this time, Qin Zhu regretted why he didn't leave a contact number when he met Zhu Mengyo's 2 best friends. Although it is not good to leave her best friend's contact information in front of Zhu Mengyo, it is still useful at a critical moment. Ding-ling-ling, the crisp ringing of the phone interrupted Qin Zhu's thoughts, and also made Dale swallow back what he wanted to say, turning around and concentrating on driving. When Qin Zhu took out his cell phone from his pocket and saw the familiar photo on the screen, a look of surprise suddenly appeared on his face. "Mengyo, is that you?" Qin Zhu picked up the phone impatiently, but before he could ask any questions, he was interrupted by a sob. "Hubby, I miss you, what's wrong?" "Mengyo, what happened?" Qin Zhu became anxious when he heard Zhu Mengyo's crying voice on the other side of the phone. Could it be that the bloody thing in the legend really happened to him? In fact, when he couldn't contact Zhu Mengyo on the first day, Qin Zhu had this idea in his mind. After all, compared to the Zhu family, he was considered to be marrying up. He had some money, but in front of Waxia, in front of a big family like the Zhu family in Yanjing, this money was not enough. In particular, he was still a foreign national. For a political family, this was simply a fatal blow. Although Zhu Mengyo's parents had agreed to their relationship, Qin Zhu's heart had never been at ease. After all, in the Zhu family, Zhu Mengyo's parents' words did not carry much weight. When he thought of this, Qin Zhu felt that his head was a big. If such a thing really happened, what should he do? Should he just give up? Qin Zhu was thinking wildly, but he heard Zhu Mengyo say in a crying tone, my grandpa is dying." "What?" Qin Zhu was a little confused. "What's going on?" It's a little different from what he thought. Soon, under Zhu Mengyo's intermittent narration, Qin Zhu finally figured out the general situation. It turned out that the reason why Zhu's mother called Zhu Mengyo to go home was because Mr. Zhu was suddenly seriously ill and hospitalized. The old man of the Zhu family was hospitalized, and it was very dangerous. It was not an ordinary big event. The whole Zhu family had to be present. Moreover, in order not to leak specific information, not only the entire hospital implemented signal shielding, but also no one was allowed to enter or leave. There was no way. The old man's illness was too sudden, disrupting the entire Zhu family's layout. If they didn't stabilize their position while others were not able to react, the Zhu family might be squeezed out of the top circle in Yanjing. "So, you have been accompanying your grandfather in the hospital these days?" Qin Zhu's face was a little hot when he asked this question. Fortunately, Zhu Mengyo didn't know what he was thinking, otherwise he would be in big trouble. "Yes, Grandpa's condition is a little more stable today, so Uncle let us come back." Zhu Mengyo sobbed softly, and said sadly, "But the doctor said that Grandpa is just hanging on by a thread now. Who knows when he will." This, Qin Zhu also sighed. "Mengyo, birth, aging, sickness and death, everyone will have this day, right? But I can't bear to leave Grandpa." Zhu Mengyo choked and said, "Grandpa loved me when I was a child, especially after that incident. Some people said that they would find someone to marry me off, and it was Grandpa who stopped them. And if Grandpa hadn't spoken, do you think my parents would be so easy to talk to?" "Mengyo, what do you mean?" Qin Zhu couldn't help frowning as he listened to Zhu Mengyo's reminiscent murmurs on the phone. Saying so much at once, it doesn't seem like Zhu Mengyo's style. "Husband, can you save my grandpa?" Chapter 1059 Arrival in Yanjing. Qin Zhu didn't think he could save Mr. Zhu, and he never thought about saving people with his own skills. There was no other reason. Even if he wanted to save someone, the person had to be willing to let him save him. What was Mr. Zhu's identity? Not to mention that he had neither a medical license nor had he studied Chinese medicine. Even the top experts and professors in China and masters of medicine had to go through layers of review before they could treat Mr. Zhu. However, all this was no match for Zhu Mengyo's soft words. Forget it, let's die. Dai doesn't need to refund the ticket. Continue to go to the airport. With a sigh, Qin Zhu put his phone aside, motioned Dai to continue driving, and then called the system in his heart. System, is there any way to get rid of the side effects of the spiritual liquid? Yes, if the only way Qin Zhu could save Mr. Zhu was the spiritual liquid. Of course, Zhu Mengyo didn't know this, she just heard about the deeds of those female bodyguards. Broken legs reborn, broken arms reunited. No matter how serious the injury is, it can be restored to its original state in Qin Zhu's hands, and there are even reports of breakthroughs. It has to be said that this is simply a miracle in the history of medicine. Zhu Mengyo knew these things before, but she never asked about them, nor did she explore the secrets of her man. In her opinion, if Qin Zhu wanted to tell her, she didn't need to ask. If Qin Zhu didn't want to tell her, then it would be useless to ask, and she might even get some lies. Why bother to trouble herself? However, those were all in the past. When she learned that her grandfather was critically ill and that her family was about to face a crisis, Zhu Mengyo thought of Qin Zhu first. Unfortunately, she didn't know how serious the side effects of using the spiritual liquid were. Otherwise, Qin Zhu would have given it to her long ago. Theoretically, it can be removed. Qin Zhu was delighted by the mechanical voice of the system. He asked anxiously, how to remove it? Does it need to be purified? System, tell me quickly. It does need to be purified. As long as the spiritual liquid is turned into spiritual stones, the side effects will disappear. Spiritual stones. How to do this? Sorry, there is no information on this in the system at present. The corners of his mouth twitched involuntarily, and Qin Zhu muttered with a black line in his head. In other words, there is no way. For now, yes. The voice of the system was still flat and without a trace of emotion. At this time, Qin Zhu suddenly missed the elf. He didn't know how she was doing in another world. Although he successfully saved the girl's life and prevented her from becoming a wisp of air, she could only live in another world accordingly. After all, there were no elves in this world. Forget it, let's take it one step at a time. Who knows whether it will be a blessing or a curse? Yanji International Airport, 6 p.m., a light blue BMW V10-5 slowly stopped near the airport pickup gate. The airport security guard who was patrolling nearby saw this and hurried over. Just as he was about to ask this guy who ignored the airport regulations to leave, he found that the front windshield of the car was covered with various passes. Brother Gu, this can't be fake. On the way back, a young security guard was still a little confused. Even Songhai's pass is there, this is too outrageous, right? What do you know? The older security guard next to him glared at him, whether it's true or not, it's not our business. Just report the matter truthfully, understand? But, after a long time, the young security guard couldn't get his words back, and just sighed helplessly. Just like Brother Gu said, whether it's true or not, it's not something that a commoner like me can control. However, looking at the girl in the car who looked like a person in a painting, hugging a man with an ordinary appearance, his heart was still filled with envy. Don't cry, I'm here, aren't I? Holding the slender waist of the beauty in his arms, looking at her slightly pale face, Qin Zhu said with some heartache. Didn't I tell you to wait for me at home? Why are you disobedient again? Resting her head on Qin Zhu's shoulder, Zhu Mengyo felt that her heart was much more settled. She let Qin Zhu chatter non-stop, and she just said softly, I miss you. In an instant, the world became quiet, Qin Zhu's arms were closer, and the two hearts were tightly pressed together. After a while, Qin Zhu was the first to come to his senses. He turned his head and looked around. He found that a security guard was staring at them closely. He couldn't help but smile bigly. Okay, let's go back first. If we stay any longer, they will come up to chase us away. No, they dare not. Following Qin Zhu's gaze, Zhu Mengyo also found the security guards who were watching them, but she remained unmoved. With the passes in her car, not to mention these ordinary security guards, even the police dared not intervene. Of course, Zhu Mengyo did not mean to bully others. The reason why she came out so high profile this time was mainly because she did not go back to her own home, and the car she drove was also her uncle's. Okay, let's go back first, I haven't eaten for a day. Touching his stomach, Qin Zhu felt that if he hadn't eaten a bowl of noodles in the morning, he would probably starve to death on the plane. It's not that there is no food on the plane, but mainly because he was too absorbed in thinking and forgot. Well, let's go eat first. With a somewhat embarrassed smile, Zhu Mengyo took Qin Zhu's hand and got into the car directly. No one's home these 2 days, and I may not be able to accompany you often. Are you staying in a hotel or at my place? Why stay in a hotel? Of course I'll stay at home when I come back. Qin Zhu smiled and pinched Zhu Mengyo's little hand, still so soft and boneless. Why don't you buy a house in Yanjin? So you don't have to stay in a hotel when you come back in the future. Hearing this, Zhu Mengyo shook her head gently. There's no need to buy a house, I have already made one. Huh? You have a house in Yanjin? Qin Zhu looked at her curiously. Of course I do. Zhu Mengyo smiled and explained, although I often stay at home, I have already bought a house, but I just think it's troublesome to cook alone and I'm too lazy to live there. Okay, I forgot that you're still a little rich woman. Thinking of Zhu Mengyo's identity, Qin Zhu was relieved immediately. Although the housing prices in Yanjin are high, if even people from a family like her can't afford it, then there are few people in the whole of China who can afford it. They chatted all the way until they arrived at the restaurant. When they ate something and rushed back, the two of them tacitly did not mention Mr. Zhu's illness. Even though Zhu Mengyo was still a little uncomfortable, and even though Qin Zhu still didn't know how to eliminate the side effects of the spiritual fluid, they still didn't show it on their faces. When there are many people, there are many things to say. The fewer people know about this kind of thing, the better. Let's talk about it slowly when there are only two of us. Chapter 1060. Zhu Lao summers. In the small apartment in Yanjin, Qin Zhu stayed in a restless mood for a few days, waiting for Zhu Mengyo's call. Before coming to China, Qin Zhu was full of confidence in his spiritual liquid. The only thing he was worried about was that someone would discover the side effects in it. But when Zhu Mengyo took the spiritual liquid back, Qin Zhu became uneasy. Every day, whenever his cell phone rang or someone knocked on the door, his heartbeat would suddenly accelerate. There was even one time when Surui came to find Qin Zhu. After knocking on the door for a long time, she saw that Qin Zhu's face was not right when she entered the room. She thought he had done something shameful and exploded immediately. Regardless of Qin Zhu's explanation, she pushed the door open and searched room by room, even under the bed. You know, that was an integrated Simmons bed, not the old-fashioned bunk bed. Qin Zhu didn't know whether to laugh or cry, but also felt a little helpless. Although Surui's suspicion made him depressed, her concern for Zhu Mengyo made Qin Zhu not angry. Fortunately, everything was a misunderstanding. After Surui turned the whole apartment upside down, she finally believed Qin Zhu's explanation. Of course, looking at the expression on her face, Qin Zhu knew that although this girl said she believed him, she didn't know what she was thinking in her heart. However, these were not what Qin Zhu cared about the most. What he cared about the most was the military hospital, how Zhu Mengyo was doing now. Ding-ling-ling, the piercing ring of the phone suddenly sounded, making Qin Zhu's heart jump subconsciously. Is there any news? Slowly getting up from the sofa, Qin Zhu took the phone with a guilty conscience, looked at the familiar number on it, and his face was happy. Mengyo, is that you? Of course, Qin Zhu, I have good news for you. Zhu Mengyo, who was standing in the corner of the hospital corridor, said with a little excitement, my grandfather wants to see you. What? Qin Zhu was a little confused when he heard it. What kind of good news was this? He hated meeting parents the most, especially meeting such an old man with a very transcendent status and position. Qin Zhu felt even more guilty. There is no way, just like the ancient Tycoons, even Shinwan-san, who was as rich as a country, still had to kneel down and call himself a commoner after seeing Zhu Yuanzhang. Oh, I'll tell you in detail when you come. Considering the sharp-eyed and sharp-eared guards around him, Zhu Mengyo hesitated for a moment, and still said, a car will pick you up later, just come with them. Okay, see you later. After hanging up the phone depressed, Qin Zhu couldn't help but stand up and paced back and forth in the living room. This damn girl, why did she sell herself without saying anything? He knew without thinking that Mr. Zhu must have recovered his health now. Moreover, judging from the call made by Zhu Mengyo, Mr. Zhu's health has recovered quite well. Otherwise, he would not be so impatient to summon him. But this discovery did not make Qin Zhu feel happy, but cast a shadow on his heart. After all, the effect is so amazing, and it can even be said to be a magic medicine that can snatch people from the hands of the King of Hell. Who doesn't want to have it in their own hands? This is also the reason why Qin Zhu dared not take out the spiritual liquid in his hand even though he knew that it had an incredible effect. even though the spiritual liquid could make people who had taken it feel awe from the bottom of their hearts. Because in this world, no one person has the final say. Forget it, let's take it one step at a time. At most, I can say that I got this thing by accident. Without evidence, I believe they won't do anything to me, right? Although thinking so, Kinzu still felt a little unsure in his heart, and he couldn't help but pace in the living room anxiously. Hey, do you think you have to do that? When Kinzu walked around the living room anxiously, Suruli, who was sitting on the sofa watching TV next to him, couldn't help but muttered unhappily. Isn't it just that Mr. Zhu wants to see you? Look how scared you are. Did you do something bad? Hearing the voice coming from the side, Kinzu paused and asked subconsciously. Why are you here? Suruli, who was still staring at Kinzu with some suspicion, suddenly froze. What does this guy mean? Why is she here? I am such a living person, and I have been here for such a long time. Could this guy really not see it? Deliberate, this guy must have done it on purpose. He must think that I ruined his good deeds, so he deliberately took revenge on me. Yes, it must be like this. Suruli cursed Kinzu in her heart, her face was ugly, and she said word by word. I came in the morning, and it was you who opened the door for me. Did you forget? Really? Kinzu scratched his hair in confusion. It seemed that he did open the door for her in the morning. But this can't be blamed on Kinzu. Who asked this girl to knock on the door early in the morning? He was half asleep at the time and went to open the door. When he saw it was her, he ignored it and went back to the bedroom to continue sleeping. In addition, when he got up, this girl was curled up in the sofa and didn't say anything, and Kinzu was thinking about his own things, so he subconsciously ignored her. HMPH, let's talk about you. Seeing that Kinzu seemed to have remembered something, Suruli couldn't help but curl her lips and continued to stare at him with suspicion. It's not like Mr. Zhu didn't agree with your relationship, and you've already met the parents. Now it's just a formality. What are you afraid of? Have you really done something to let Yo down? Just a formality. Kinzu subconsciously ignored Suruli's last sentence and retorted unhappily. You say it so easily, why don't you go through this formality? You dare to say that you're not nervous when you're asked to meet Mr. Zhu? Although Suruli wanted to say that she wasn't nervous, she couldn't help but be speechless when she recalled the scene when she went to Zhu's house to find Zhu Mengyu and accidentally ran into Mr. Zhu. The aura cultivated by being in a higher position for many years is really not something that a young lawyer like her can withstand. Forget it, I won't talk to you anymore. Since you're here, I'll give you the key. Kinzu waved his hand in annoyance. After handing the apartment key to Suruli, he muttered sadly. I don't know when I can come back. When you are free, come and help Mengyo clean up or something. Suruli, who originally understood Kinzu's feelings, laughed out loud when she heard it, and laughed so hard that she was out of breath. Hehe, clean, Kinzu, you're exaggerating a bit, right? Is Mr. Zhu that scary? Are you worried that he will never come back? No, I will talk to Mengyo later. You actually think his grandfather is so scary? Let's see how she will deal with you. Brothers and sisters, Happy New Year! I'm really sorry that I was unable to update during the Chinese New Year due to various reasons. This book will not be abandoned. After the New Year, I will start to write well. From tomorrow on, I will update twice a day. Si estés escuchando esta novela en un canal distinto a Mundo Fanfic Novelas, significat lo descarga and y subir en sin esfuerzos invitamos cordialmente a visitar nuestro canal. Mundo Fanfic Novelas all encontrás la versión original de esta historia y podrás explorar muchas otras novelas de diversos narradores. Te esperamos para sumergirte en un mundo de novelas increíbles. Chapter 1061 Secret Meeting. The car came on time and very quickly. Kinzu didn't even notice it before he was taken to the heavily guarded military region general hospital near the urban area of Yanjing by a domestically made red flag car with many passes. Clean, you're here. At the door, Zhu Mengyu, wearing the chiffon dress, looked at him with a smile. I'm glad you're okay. Taking a deep breath, looking at the smile on Zhu Mengyu's face, Kinzu felt a lot more at ease. With this relationship, Zhu's father and mother shouldn't watch their son-in-law being bullied, right? Let's go, Grandpa has been waiting for you for a while. Taking a step forward, Zhu Mengyu directly took Kinzu's arm, and as she walked, she explained in a low voice. Hubby, don't worry, my grandfather won't do anything to you, and won't ask about the source of the medicine. Really? Kinzu looked at her with some suspicion. Of course, don't you trust me? Zhu Mengyo pouted and muttered with some complaints. I'm not a fool, how could I let you fall into danger? I wouldn't let you come if I didn't handle everything well. Listening to Zhu Mengyo's slightly complaining soft words, Qin Zhu felt an inexplicable feeling in his heart. He had always been the one to support everything and consider everything for others. This was the first time that someone else considered him. What's wrong? Are you angry? Seeing Qin Zhu remained silent, Zhu Mengyo felt a little guilty. She looked at his face and explained carefully. I have already told Grandpa and the others, and they can't thank you enough, so how could they have bad thoughts about you? Our Zhu family is not the kind of ungrateful family. Why should I be angry? Qin Zhu heard this, gently pinched Zhu Mengyo's little face, and said lovingly, don't say they don't have bad thoughts about me. Even if they really have bad thoughts, I will come here for you without hesitation. Hubby, you are so nice. Although Qin Zhu said only a word from his heart, but in Zhu Mengyo's ears, it was the most beautiful love words in the world, and she was moved to tears. In fact, before Qin Zhu came, Surui had already called her, and on the phone, she vividly described Qin Zhu's performance this morning to her. Originally, Zhu Mengyo was a little angry when she heard Surui's description, thinking that Qin Zhu was not trusting her, but now she thought about it from another perspective, and she suddenly woke up. Qin Zhu still came here without hesitation even though he knew it might be a trap. Doesn't this prove something? Okay, let's go in first. People are watching outside. Being stared at affectionately by Zhu Mengyo at the hospital entrance, Qin Zhu felt a little embarrassed. Especially the strange looks from the people around him made him feel even more embarrassed. Well, let's go in and talk about it. Nodding obediently, Zhu Mengyo leaned against Qin Zhu, and the two walked towards the inpatient department together. How is it? Have you checked it out? When Qin Zhu just stepped into the hospital, in a conference room on the top floor, several middle-aged soldiers with gold stars on their shoulders stared at a woman who came in with serious faces. To be precise, it was a woman in military uniform, and her face was somewhat similar to Zhu Mengyo. Uncle, it has been checked out. Here is the report. The female officer who walked into the conference room handed the documents in her hand to several elders sitting at the conference table one by one with a puzzled look on her face. The female officer's name is Zhu Jin. She is Zhu Mengyo's older cousin. She is just 25 years old this year and works in a secret intelligence department. But this time, she suddenly received an order from her family to secretly investigate a man, and the results must be produced within 2 days. If that was not strange enough, then as the investigation deepened, Zhu Jin couldn't help but feel strange when she found out that the man was actually her cousin's boyfriend. However, Zhu Jin, who is engaged in intelligence work herself, knows what to ask and what not to ask. Therefore, although she was full of doubts, she took the report as soon as the investigation results came out. Is there anything strange? A middle-aged man sitting at the top took the document handed over by Zhu Jin, flipped through it casually, and asked directly. There is one strange thing. Zhu Jin walked to the middle-aged man, flipped through a few pages of the document, and introduced. Qin Zhu's experience from childhood to adulthood was very normal, but everything changed since September last year. First, he had never been involved in the antique industry, but he and his cousin successfully picked up a big bargain in the antique street. Then, another overseas consortium suddenly selected him as the heir, and inherited the consortium's asset worth billions of dollars. Wait, raising his hand, a middle-aged man sitting below suddenly interrupted Zhu Jin's introduction. Xiao Jin, are you saying that the man who saved your cousin was Qin Zhu? Yes, second uncle. Looking at Zhu's father, Zhu Jin nodded gently. When my cousin was attacked, he saved my cousin, and then left quietly, It turned out to be him, no wonder. Zhu's father sighed, and finally understood why his daughter liked Qin Zhu. When his daughter was attacked, he was away from the country because of a mission. When he came back, the murderer had been executed, so he didn't know much about the incident. Although he knew that someone had saved his daughter, because technology was not as advanced as it is now, and there were no cameras on the road where the accident happened, after searching for a month without finding the person, the case was left unresolved. Now that I think about it, my daughter should have had a good impression of the young man who stood up at the time, right? Well, since this person was not trained by them, it means he is not an enemy. Let's stop here. Seeing that Father Zhu stopped talking, the middle-aged man sitting in the first seat put down the information in his hand. Although his experience is a bit strange, it has nothing to do with this. Besides, Qin Zhu saved Mengyo a few years ago, and now he has saved the old man. I don't need to say more about his kindness to our Zhu family. No matter who it is, they can't plot against him again. Well, what you said makes sense, brother. I agree. Father Zhu nodded first. I agree, and even if someone has bad intentions, the old man will probably be the first to disagree, right? A middle-aged man in a suit sitting at the other side also nodded in agreement with a smile. Moreover, there was a hint of warning in his words. Okay, third brother, you don't need to tell us, we all understand the truth. Sitting next to the middle-aged man was a beautiful middle-aged woman. She smiled and said, everyone will have birth, old age, sickness and death, and no one will be stupid enough to offend a person who has the ability to bring the dead back to life. That's good to know. The middle-aged man in a suit, who was called third brother by the beautiful woman, smiled and nodded. I'm afraid that some people think they can control others, and then they will fail to win and then give rise, which will be more trouble than gain. Hearing what the middle-aged man said, the men who were originally looking strange suddenly laughed awkwardly. Obviously, they had that intention. Chapter 1062. Being taught a lesson without Qin Zhu's knowledge, a secret meeting quietly began and ended. When he saw the dozen middle-aged officers in uniforms with little stars on their shoulder straps in the ward, he couldn't help but tremble in his heart. Although he could crush these people in terms of wealth, he believed that any one of them would make him unable to leave China. Fortunately, after communicating with them, these people were very enthusiastic about Qin Zhu, so enthusiastic that Qin Zhu was a little flattered. Wife, what do they mean by this? After finally getting away from a group of generals, Qin Zhu, accompanied by Zhu Mengyo, found a lounge and sat down, and then he breathed a sigh of relief. Isn't this attitude too enthusiastic? And your cousin, why does it feel like there's something wrong with the way she looks at me? Zhu Mengyo, who was following behind Qin Zhu, laughed when she heard the words. Hubby, don't you know? My cousin is very curious about you now. Curious? Qin Zhu scratched his head. What is there to be curious about? I'm not an alien. That's hard to say. Holding up a white onion-like finger and shaking it gently, Zhu Mengyo teased with a smile. You can become rich overnight, and you have such a magical special medicine, it's not strange to say that you are an alien. Really? Qin Zhu's heart jumped when he heard it, but he didn't say anything, but smiled wickedly and said, Wife, don't you know whether I'm an alien or not? Although Qin Zhu's words were very serious, but with his naughty expression, it didn't look like a good thing. TSK, it's because I know you that I think you were an alien. What Qin Zhu didn't expect was that in the face of his teasing, although Zhu Mengyo's face was a little blushing, she still stubbornly muttered, You toss and turn for so long every night, how can a normal person be so perverted? Qin Zhu was a little amused and didn't know whether to laugh or cry. Is it my fault that I persisted for a long time? But he said nothing, and stretched out his hand, directly pulling Zhu Mengyo into his arms. Since you said so, then I really want to let you taste the aliens. No, there are still people outside. The next day, Kyoto International Airport. Zhu Mengyo, wearing a white chiffon dress, held Qin Zhu's hand reluctantly, her voice full of nostalgia. Why are you going back so soon? I want you to stay with me for a few more days. I don't want to either. Holding Zhu Mengyo's slender waist and feeling the resilient slender waist, Qin Zhu's heart was really full of reluctance. However, compared to his own safety, these love affairs are nothing. So, after meeting Mr. Zhu and having a long talk with him, Qin Zhu prepared to return to America the next day. This was not only his idea, but also Mr. Zhu's idea. After all, there are too many things restricting him in China. Once he encounters danger, he has no ability to resist at all. Well, then you go back first, I'll go over to accompany you as soon as possible. With a sigh, Zhu Mengyo could only accept this reality helplessly despite having too many reluctances. Although she also wanted to go back with Qin Zhu, her grandfather had just recovered, and she couldn't leave immediately. Okay, you stay at home and accompany the old man well, and I'll come to pick you up when the time comes. Okay, then I'll wait for you. Knowing that Qin Zhu was just talking casually, Zhu Mengyo still nodded excitedly, and a happy smile appeared on her face. Many times, women really need some kind of sweet words. Maybe they know it's fake, maybe they know you're lying to her, but as long as you can lie to her for a lifetime, they will have no regrets. But I don't have the habit of lying, and I will definitely give you a surprise when the time comes. Qin Zhu murmured in his heart, looking at the smile on the face of the beauty next to him. The reason why he was so anxious to go back this time, in addition to worrying about his own safety, was also because of Douglas's phone call last night. Their business jet project has begun to show results. In other words, the plane that belongs to him has been modified and can be decorated internally. If Kinzu doesn't want those interior decorations, there is no problem with taking off now. This time when he goes back, Kinzu plans to equip all the maintenance personnel, and when Zhu Mengyu wants to go back, he will directly take a special plane to pick her up. Of course, Zhu Mengyu doesn't know all this, and Kinzu doesn't plan to tell her. Otherwise, where is the surprise? Dear passengers and friends, this flight is about to land at New York International Airport. With the pleasant voice of the flight attendant, Kinzu opened his slightly confused eyes and stretched lazily. Finally, I'm here. When my plane is ready, I must put a bed in it. There is no way. Because he left in a hurry this time, he didn't even buy a first-class seat, so he could only make do at the economy class for one night. If it was in the past, it would be okay. At the time, in order to go home for the new year, he would stand on the train for a whole day. However, after a year of comfortable life, Kinzu, who was used to sitting in the first-class cabin, was really not used to the economy class seat. Your plane. You can't even afford a first-class seat, and you are still thinking about a private plane. Perhaps because Kinzu was too young, a middle-aged man who was about to get off the plane next to him curled his lips in disdain after hearing his complaints. Young man, wake up, it's not dark yet, it's not time to dream. Ha ha, yes, it's just dawn outside now. Hearing the middle-aged man's words, several people who hadn't gotten off the plane next to him laughed. Isn't it? Although they took the plane at around 9 o'clock in the morning in Yanjin time, after flying for a day and arriving in New York, it was just dawn here. Ha ha, people always have to have dreams, right? Kinzu didn't get angry at the ridicule of a stranger, but instead chatted with him with a smile. Brother, what are you doing in New York? Business trip or something? Me? Of course I'm here to travel. Who flies economy class on a business trip? Picking up a SLR camera and hanging it around his neck, the middle-aged man patted Kinzu's shoulder and taught him a lesson. Young man, it's good to have dreams, but when dreams become delusions, you need to face reality. With that, the middle-aged man stopped paying attention to Kinzu, adjusted his hat, said hello to a few people around him, and walked away. Kinzu opened his mouth and didn't know whether to laugh or cry. Was he lucky? He just complained casually, and he was given a lesson. Although he was a little depressed, Kinzu didn't take it too seriously. He smiled bitterly and shook his head, carrying his small bag, and walked off the plane. Chapter 1063. Crosses. More or less. The apron of New York International Airport was supposed to be a place for parking planes and for passengers to get on and off the plane, but now it was occupied by a group of men in black suits. Not only that, behind that group of men in black suits, there was a row of pure black Rolls-Royces, which looked quite eye-catching. Open your eyes, and when Keen comes down, remember to notify me as soon as possible. Douglas, hiding in a stretched version of Rolls-Royce, held a hamburger in one hand and a milk tea in the other, with a very rich expression on his face. There was no way, in order to pick up Kinzu, he got up early in the morning and didn't even have time to eat breakfast. Okay, master. Hearing Douglas's order, a group of men in black suits around immediately agreed, and stared at the plane that had just landed. Originally, a group of passengers who had just flown directly from China were a little excited when they just stepped on the land of a foreign country, but they didn't expect to be shocked when they got off the plane. Looking at the pile of black suits and the luxury cars lined up in a row behind them, I couldn't help but murmur in my heart. Could it be that there are some big shots on their flight? I haven't heard of it. Just as the crowd of onlookers were looking around, the middle-aged man on the plane who had just taught Kinzu a lesson also saw Kinzu coming down, so he waved at him. Young man, did you see that? When you have this kind of pomp, then go and dream of a private jet. Ha ha, that's right. He must be a big shot to have so many luxury cars to pick him up. Yeah, but I didn't expect him to be so low-key and actually work in civil aviation. Listening to a group of onlookers discussing the so-called big shots, Kinzu's mouth twitched. If he was not mistaken, that group of people should be Douglas's men. Ha ha, Clean, my friend, you are finally back. Just as Kinzu was wondering if this group of people came to pick him up, Douglas, who had already received a report from his men, wiped his hands and trotted over to greet him. Hey, man, I'm only gone for a few days, okay? So, in the shocked and dazed eyes of a group of people, Kinzu hugged Douglas helplessly. Isn't it just that the plane can fly? Look how excited you are. No, Clean, you don't understand. Douglas waved his hands excitedly. Although it's just a successful first flight, do you know what it means? It means a rolling source of money. Really? Shrugging his shoulders, Kinzu was a little non-committal about this. Even if it is welcomed by everyone, what can it do? There are only a few people in the world who can afford to buy a plane. Where can the rolling source of money come from? Well, it seems that you don't believe it. Pretending to sigh, Douglas stretched out his hand to wave behind him, and immediately a person who looked like a secretary handed over a document. What is this? Kinzu took the document with some doubts, flipped it open and looked at it casually, and his eyes suddenly became straight. Fuck, how is it possible? Why is it impossible? As if he had expected Kinzu's performance, Douglas folded his arms and looked at him with a smug look. Clean, I've said before that you won't regret cooperating with me. How is it? I didn't disappoint you, did I? Ha, of course, it's beyond my expectation. After reading the document from beginning to end, Kinzu closed the document and looked at Douglas with a surprised look. How come there are so many orders? These are 10 planes. Did you get the whole family to buy the planes? It would have been fine if Kinzu didn't say this. As soon as he mentioned this, Douglas's face immediately fell. Clean, don't mention it. If someone in the family bought it, how could there be only 10? Kinzu, who originally thought that Douglas had used family connections, was really confused now. What does it mean? Are their planes really that popular? Don't doubt it, our plane is so popular. Douglas explained, spreading his hands. I just promoted it a little among my friends, and then took them to see a plane, and the order came. So simple. It's that simple. Touching his nose, Kinzu looked at Douglas' serious look and had to admit that their plane was indeed very popular. From this point of view, my investment this time should not be a loss. Of course. Douglas nodded affirmatively. As long as we complete the order of these 10 planes, the investment can basically be recovered by half. Then, I think you should have prepared a celebration party, right? Kinzu finally understood at this time that the reason why Douglas urged him to come back was not to let him come to inspect the plane, but to let him attend the celebration party. It seems that you have figured it out. Looking at Kinzu with a smile, Douglas took out a gold-stamped invitation from his arms and handed it over. The celebration party will be tomorrow. You, as the director of the company, must be there. No, Doug, make it clear. Kinzu took the invitation and was shocked by Douglas's words before he had time to take a closer look. Didn't I say that? You're only responsible for investing money. When did you become a director? Did you say that? Blinking, Douglas touched his chin with some confusion. I remember we agreed that you would be given 30% of the shares with voting rights, right? Well, it seems so, isn't that enough? Douglas said as a matter of course. If even you, who has 30% of the voting rights, can't become a director, then who else can become a director in our company? Kinzu was a little confused, and for a moment he actually felt that what this guy said made sense. But this is really not the life he wants. An investor, or shareholder, of a company and a director of a company are two completely different concepts, right? The former is only responsible for paying the money, and then he can sit and wait to get the money, but the latter is still responsible for the work. Clean, you can't regret it. Seeing that Kinzu's expression was a little strange, Douglas was a little anxious, and hurriedly said, 3 of these 10 planes were ordered by the British royal family. What do you mean? Kinzu inexplicably had a bad premonition. Ahem, this, Douglas, who realized that he had let the cat out of the bag, coughed twice and looked a little embarrassed. You won't use my name to advertise, right? How could that be? I just accidentally mentioned your identity as a shareholder, really. Are you sure you accidentally did it? Of course, I swear. If swearing is useful, why do we need the police? Kinzu curled his lips in disdain. He said that private jets are not toys, how could they sell so many right after opening? It turned out that this guy was actually using his reputation to advertise. Although Kinzu doesn't usually go out for parties and is not that famous, there will be at least a few people who will buy his products because of his relationship with the British royal family. In addition to Douglas's own personal relationship, 10 of them were sold in the first wave, which is not a lot. Doug, you have this idea from the beginning. Kinzu was a little suspicious. He suspected that this guy wanted to recruit him to join the gang because of the British royal family. How could it be? Seeing that he was exposed by Kinzu, Douglas' eyes rolled and hurriedly changed the subject. Clean, let's go out first. It's not a good idea to be watched here. At this point, Kinzu couldn't say anything else. He looked around and saw that, as he said, their group of people had become the focus. Okay, let's go. I still need to find a hotel to catch up on my sleep. I'll settle the score with you later. Kinzu glared at this guy helplessly and took the lead towards the extended version of Rolls-Royce. From the beginning to the end, he ignored the middle-aged man who taught him patiently. But it was precisely because of this indifferent attitude that the middle-aged man felt ashamed. It turned out that he was not dreaming, but really had a private jet. Chapter 1064 Celebration Party. After sleeping in the hotel until 8 o'clock in the evening, when Kinzu woke up in a daze, he found that there seemed to be a figure in front of him. Who? Kinzu sat up suddenly with a start. He remembered very clearly that he slept alone. How come there was another person in the room when he woke up? Could it be that Douglas arranged this guy? Hee, Clean, your vigilance is too poor, isn't it? Just as Kinzu was about to call Douglas, the crystal chandelier in the hotel room suddenly lit up, and under the orange light, a familiar figure came into Kinzu's eyes. Christine? Kinzu opened his mouth in surprise. Why is this girl here? Why? Don't you welcome me? Looking at the surprised expression on Kinzu's face, Christine couldn't help but feel a little disappointed. How could it be? I just didn't expect to see you when I woke up. I was a little too surprised. Kinzu said as he stood up from the bed and held her soft body in his arms. Although Kinzu did not plan to go to her in the next 2 days, since she was here now, he couldn't push her away, right? HMPH, you're just talking, otherwise why didn't you come to see me when you came to New York? Although Christine didn't break free from Kinzu's arms, there was still a hint of dissatisfaction in her words. Obviously, Christine felt a little disappointed that Kinzu didn't come to see her in New York but chose to stay in a hotel. I'm not too tired, am I? Kinzu gently comforted the beauty in his arms, and his eyes turned, and he saw Douglas in an instant. This hotel was booked for me by Douglas in advance. If I don't stay here, it will be a waste, and I will be sorry for his kindness, right? Douglas. As expected, he heard what Kinzu said, and Christine's attention immediately shifted to her cousin. Yes, it's him. Kinzu nodded affirmatively. He picked me up as soon as I got off the plane, and insisted that I stay here, saying that it would be convenient for me to attend the celebration party tomorrow. Celebration party? What celebration party? Christine was a little confused. Don't you know? Kinzu was also puzzled. Isn't Christine Douglas's cousin? How come she doesn't even know this? Could it be that he still kept it a secret from his family? As if seeing Kinzu's doubts, Christine shrugged helplessly. As you thought, I know nothing. That guy didn't tell me there would be any celebration party tomorrow, nor did he invite me to any celebration party. This damn guy, just wait, I will make him pay. Ahem, Chris, seeing that Christine took out her cell phone and was about to call Douglas, Kinzu coughed twice, and hurriedly dissuaded her. I think that since Doug didn't tell you, he must have his own purpose. Let's not make things difficult for him. That's true. Christine stopped what she was doing, thought for a while, and asked this time. Clean, has your cousin told you what the theme of this celebration party is? Theme? Of course it's the hot sales of our aircraft. Kinzu, who had just asked Christine not to make things difficult for Douglas, turned around and sold him out, and said with a smile. The aircraft manufacturing plant received a large order for 10 aircraft right after it opened, and your cousin was so happy that he didn't know what to do. 10? So many. Even with Christine's knowledge, she was shocked by the news Kinzu said, and couldn't help but be amazed. No wonder my cousin wanted to keep it a secret. Oh? Kinzu became curious when he saw Christine's sudden realization. Chris, do you know Doug's intention? Of course. Nodding affirmatively, Christine came to sit down next to Kinzu and explained with a smile. The reason why my cousin came out to start his own business is because some people in the family are dissatisfied with him holding power, and he came out to prove his ability. Is that so? He nodded. He had guessed this a long time ago, otherwise this guy would not have thought of pulling him to build an aircraft manufacturing plant. However, what does this have to do with his secrecy? Since he wants to prove himself, isn't it better to make a bigger noise? As if seeing Kinzu's doubts, Christine smiled, half leaned on him, and explained with a smile. Clean, sometimes it is more useful for others to praise him than for him to take the initiative to praise him. Well, now that it has come to this, if Kinzu still doesn't understand, then he is too stupid. To put it bluntly, Douglas is now a whore and still wants to build a memorial archway. He wants to prove to his family how capable he is, but he doesn't want people to say that he is just showing off after achieving some achievements. Therefore, this celebration party is very crucial. I have to say, you guys are really tired. Shaking his head, Kinzu looked at Christine with some emotion. Are all people from big families like you? Do they consider every aspect before doing anything? How is that possible? Those who can do this are the elites of the family, okay? As she said that, Christine seemed to think of something funny and laughed. Clean, take me for example. I also come from a big family. If I had to consider so much before doing anything, would I still be here? Although Christine said this with a smile, Kinzu felt a little sad and couldn't help but hug her. Chris, I'm sorry, I'm too greedy, I want everything. No, Clean, no need to say sorry. Extending a white and tender finger and gently pressing on Kinzu's lips, Christine looked at his not-so-handsome face with burning eyes. If you want to blame someone, blame fate for making us meet at the wrong time. Chris, I want to kiss you. Then what are you waiting for, The next day, in the hotel banquet hall. Hello, what? Are you still on the way? Hiding in an empty corner, Douglas held the phone, listening to the voice on the other end of the receiver, and felt a little headache. Chris, the celebration party is about to start, can you let Keen come back first? Celebration party? What celebration party? Christine, who was curled up on the soft sofa in the hotel, pouted at Kinzu and asked knowingly. Cousin, Keen is accompanying me shopping, so she doesn't have time to accompany you to any celebration party. Hey, Chris, can you let Keen answer the phone? Rubbing his head, Douglas felt something was wrong. If he continued talking, it would be difficult for him to escape the clutches of this cousin. Are you looking for Keen? Looking at Kinzu who was sitting next to him, Christine rolled his eyes and said with a smile. Cousin, Keen went to the bathroom. Just tell me if you have anything to say. You, looking at the time, Douglas gritted his teeth and couldn't help but said. Chris, cousin is wrong. Just tell me if you have any request. Really? Making a victory gesture towards Kinzu, Christine said excitedly. Cousin, I saw a sports car yesterday, but I don't have enough money. What should I do? Not enough money. The corners of his mouth couldn't help but twitch. Douglas thought to himself, can't you come up with a better excuse? Although his family is indeed richer than Christine's family, if he said that Chris couldn't even afford a sports car now, he would never believe it. However, the situation was stronger than the person. Douglas looked at the guests who came in one after another and could only grit his teeth and say, bye, after today is over, your cousin will take you to buy. Yeah, Christine couldn't help but cheer, cousin is so nice, we will go downstairs now. Come down. Aren't you shopping? Douglas felt something was wrong. Really? Did I say I was shopping? Knowing that she had let the cat out of the bag, Christine pretended to be stupid and responded with a few words, then hung up the phone directly, leaving Douglas alone there with tears in his eyes. If he had known that Kinzu was upstairs, why would he make a phone call? Wouldn't he have just asked someone to open the door? Chapter 1065. The cargo ship that stood on the reef, sunshine, beach, coast. A breeze with a slight smell of the sea accompanied the scorching sun. A silver-white luxury yacht sailed out of the dock like a wave. Clean, why aren't you sleeping so early in the morning? Kristen yawned lazily, half-closed her eyes and leaned against the bow, looking at Kinzu with a resentful look. The celebration party lasted until after 1 o'clock last night. She hadn't slept for a few hours, but she was pulled out to sea by this guy. Doesn't this guy know how serious it is for women to lack sleep? I think the weather is good today, so, Kinzu rubbed his hands, looking anxiously in the distance, while explaining incoherently. Nice weather. Oh no, Kristen rubbed her golden hair a little madly and turned to walk into the yacht. I don't care about you. I'll go catch up on my sleep. Call me when we get to the destination. Okay, go to sleep first. Kinzu was not disappointed at all about Christine's departure. Instead, he was relieved. There was no way. Facing her blue eyes, Kinzu really couldn't bear to lie. But he couldn't not lie. Should he tell her that your man was just attached to a snake and patrolling the fishing grounds, and suddenly saw a cargo ship hit a reef? That's right, this morning when Kinzu woke up and controlled Cheese to wander in the sea, he happened to see a cargo ship hit a reef and was about to sink in his fishing ground. Although it was a little strange that a cargo ship would pass through their fishing ground, when human lives were at stake, Kinzu didn't care about anything else and took out his phone and called Will at the fishing ground. After asking him to call the police, Kinzu thought about it and was still a little worried. He took the sleeping Christine to the Dr. Renter yacht and rushed directly to the fishing ground. Fortunately, New York and Boston are not too far apart, and it is even closer by sea. After Kinzu drove the yacht to full power, it took only half an hour to return to the fishing ground. However, before he could get to the scene, Will called first. "Boss, something big has happened. What's wrong? Have all the crew members been rescued?" Hearing Will say this, Kinzu subconsciously thought that the people on the cargo ship had not been rescued, and his heart was a little heavy for a while. Fuck, it would be great if those bastards were dead. Why didn't they drown? To Kinzu's surprise, he actually cursed when he heard him care about the safety of the crew. "Will, what's the situation now?" Kinzu frowned. "Did something happen?" "Boss, they are oil tankers, and they are all loaded with crude oil." Will's voice was filled with tears. "It's over, it's all over, our fishing ground is all over." "What?" There was a buzz in his mind, and Kinzu could no longer hear Will sobbing on the other end of the phone. Crude oil. A shipload of crude oil. In an instant, Kinzu recalled the crude oil spills that had occurred in recent years, and his face turned completely black. Just like Will said, it's over, his Tycoon fishery is completely over. Because no matter which crude oil spill, the final result is to create a dead sea, a real dead sea. The fish and shrimps are dead, and even the seaweed can't survive. What's the situation now? Although Kinzu wanted to kill someone at this moment, he still suppressed his anger and asked, "Has anyone from the police come? How were they going to deal with this?" "Boss, the crude oil has started to leak." Will looked at the police chief who was roaring on the phone next to him, and said helplessly, "Chief Stella is next to me now, but they can't do anything about this." Listening to Will's answer, Kinzu was speechless. For the first time, he felt that money was not omnipotent. In the past, if there was any trouble, he could just spend some money to settle it, but what about now? In fact, his loss was not too big, because there was an insurance company, but did Kinzu lack money? He really doesn't lack money. Not to mention that he has shares in Douglas Airport. With the shares of Pingo Company, he will never have to worry about money in his life. But is this what he wants? No. What Kinzu wants now is not money, but a career of his own, a career that can improve his social status. The ranch is a career, and it is also very profitable, but it can't provide many jobs after all, which is not what Kinzu wants. Therefore, the chain restaurant that is being vigorously developed is his main goal. However, now it seems that everything has to start all over again. Clean, I'm sorry for what happened. After arriving at the scene, Kinzu boarded the police rescue boat and found that there were not too few people coming. Police Chief Stella, Revere's Mayor Wesley, and even the Boston Police Department were already on the boat. "I don't want to hear that, but how you are going to deal with this matter?" Waving his hand, Kinzu interrupted Stella's words, looking at the black oil spots that kept floating on the sea, and asked expressionlessly, "Are you just going to let the crude oil continue to leak?" "In fact, we have thought of several ways, but the results show that none of them work." Mayor Wesley straightened his clothes and looked at Kinzu with a heavy face. "Clean, none of us want to see this happen, but now that things have come to this, you should contact the insurance company as soon as possible. Don't those people from the Ocean Bureau have any solution?" Kinzu rubbed his temples. "Oil spills have happened so many times, haven't those guys thought about how to solve it?" "I thought about it, but it's useless, the pollution is still pollution." Wesley said this and sighed helplessly. "Why did this damn freighter come here? There is no cargo port nearby. Maybe they want to take a shortcut." Shrugging his shoulders, Kinzu gave up the last glimmer of hope and took out his phone to call the insurance company. In fact, just as Wesley said, crude oil spills are not difficult to clean up, but what is difficult to clean up is the pollution to the environment after the spill. After all this trouble, let alone raising fish in his fishery, it would be difficult to even raise seaweed. After notifying the insurance company to come and investigate the situation, Kinzu ignored their almost desperate roar and hung up the phone. Since his fishery was insured, he had to be prepared for bankruptcy. Well, Kinzu thought this was normal. As soon as Kinzu hung up the phone, Will came over and pointed to another rescue ship. There were several crew members who were rescued. "Boss, I think there is something wrong with those guys." Listening to Will's words, Kinzu looked at the other rescue ship. Several crew members were sitting on the deck to rest, and he didn't find anything unusual. What's wrong with them? Chapter 1066 Insurance Company Facing Bankruptcy. On the rough sea, patches of black oil stains were particularly eye-catching. On the rescue boat, several crew members rescued by the rescue team looked nervous as they watched the policemen coming and going around them. "Hey Tycoon, what should we do now?" The thin Suzuki-ish hero shrank his neck and said with a sad face, "How did they come so quickly?" "How should I know?" Looking at the slowly sinking tanker in the distance, the captain Ichiro Hayata did not have a trace of joy after being rescued, and his face was so gloomy that water was about to drip out. That was the tanker that had accompanied him for almost 10 years. He dedicated his youth to this tanker. He thought he could stay with it until the end of his life, but now it sank. Although he was mentally prepared, Ichiro Hayata still couldn't suppress the sadness in his heart. "Hey, buddy, can you understand me?" Behind him, a black man in a police uniform came over and gestured to them. "Hi." The habit he had developed over the years made Ichiro Hayata stand up quickly and bow deeply to the person who came. "Islanders?" Kinzu, who followed the black policeman closely, raised his eyebrows slightly, and a hint of doubt appeared in his heart. Originally, when Will said that their reaction was a bit abnormal, Kinzu didn't take it to heart, but now it seems that something is really wrong. Because according to the route of the tanker, they were going to Boston, but they ran aground and sank in their own fishing grounds. But the resources of the island country itself are poor, and they can't even import oil in time. When will it be their turn to export oil? Moreover, it stands to reason that such a big thing happened, and these crew members must have been scared. After being rescued, they should be glad that they're still alive. But now, in addition to being a little nervous, their faces are full of anxious expressions. What are they anxious about? Director Stella. Turning and walking into the cabin, Kinzu found Stella, who was on the phone. "Can you help me check where this tanker came from and where its destination is?" "Of course, I'm checking." Stella nodded at Kinzu, handed over a notebook beside her, and then shouted into the phone again. Taking the notebook, Kinzu looked at Stella in surprise. He didn't expect that although this guy looked a little bloated, he was very efficient in doing things. However, thinking about the impact of this matter on Revere, Kinzu didn't find it strange. Change route halfway. Kinzu opened the notebook and found something wrong after just a cursory glance. This tanker should have gone directly to the port of Yokohama, an island country, but it suddenly changed route to Boston halfway. Because it was not familiar with the route, it ran aground. As for the reason for the change of route, it was very simple and crude. The fleet needed supplies. Does it need to go so far for supplies? Kinzu didn't believe it, and Stella didn't believe it either, so he had notified the bureau to prepare the car. As soon as the ship docked, all the rescued crew members were taken to the bureau. "Boss, what should we do now?" Will, who followed Kinzu off the boat, looked a little uneasy. The fishery was now finished. What should these fishermen do? "Will, don't worry. There are many places in Boston where you can raise fish." Turning around, Kinzu stood on the dock and looked at the sea level in the distance. After thinking for a while, he said, "How about this? I'll give you a month's vacation. You go back and rest first, and wait for me to deal with things here." "Okay, boss." Not only did he not lose his job, but he also had an extra month of vacation. Will's mood was finally much better. He nodded to Kinzu and turned to leave. After Will left, the remaining fishermen in the fishery also got the news and followed him. For a while, only Kinzu and Christine were still looking into the distance on the dock. They couldn't leave because the insurance company hadn't arrived yet. After waiting for more than 10 minutes, the insurance company hadn't arrived yet, but the reporters carrying long guns and short guns came first. Fortunately, Kinzu saw that the situation was not right and pulled Christine to hide on the yacht in time, so that they were not blocked by those guys. "Chris, it looks like I'm going to be famous again this time." Watching the reporters go away on the boat, Kinzu couldn't help but smile and shook his head. He could already imagine what the headlines would be tomorrow. "Clean, you don't have to worry too much." Seeing Kinzu's face was a little gloomy, Christine comforted him softly. "We have the insurance company, we won't lose too much." "Hey, we didn't lose much, we're just afraid they're going to go bankrupt." Hearing Christine's words, Kinzu thought of the fate of the insurance company when the last hurricane hit, and a smile appeared on the corner of his mouth. "Well, maybe." Turning his head to look at the fishing ground not far away, thinking of the loss this time, Christine felt a little sympathetic for the insurance company. Even if it didn't go bankrupt, it would probably lose a lot of money. They didn't have to wait too long. As soon as the reporters left, the insurance company's people rushed to the dock. Because Qinzyu's insurance amount was relatively large, even though it was not yet working hours, the insurance company still sent a deputy general manager. Mr. Clean, can you tell us the details of the situation? After a few pleasantries, Deputy General Manager Seth, who looked not very good, started to ask about the situation directly. Well, how should I put it? Touching his nose, Qinzyu explained the general situation, and then said, Mr. Seth, shall we go to the scene and take a look? Ahem, okay. Seth, whose face turned paler the more he listened, wiped the cold sweat from his forehead, and followed with a staggering step. Based on Qinzyu's simple description, he could already foresee his fate. If he was lucky, he could get some money to be laid off, but if he was unlucky, he would even lose this month's salary. Mr. Lint, things are a bit bad. Sitting on the yacht rented by Qinzyu, Seth thought for a long time, and finally took out his mobile phone to call the boss of the company. With such a big thing happening, he had to notify the person in charge of the company to make preparations in advance. Well, preparations for bankruptcy. As expected, after hearing Seth's report, Lint, who was still holding his mistress and preparing for morning exercises, was stunned. It's over, it's all over. He knew very well how big Qinzyu's fishery was. Because he personally pulled this order over, from an insurance company that had just gone bankrupt. Although the risk is a bit high, it will be easier for him to raise the premium, right? Besides, such a big hurricane only comes once in more than 10 years. How could he be so unlucky? But now, listening to the report of his deputy general manager, Lind wanted to slap himself twice. Sight, you take a good look at the situation. I'll go to the company now. Without saying goodbye to the confused woman on the bed, Lind pulled up his pants and rushed downstairs. I hope it's not too late. Chapter 1067 Missing. Quickly come, quickly go. After taking a few photos at the place where the accident happened, Seth, looking frustrated, left with a few insurance company employees. It was said that they went to the police station to consult about some situations. Of course, Qinzyu understood this expression. After watching them leave, he rushed back to New York with Christine. Although this is still his fishing ground, he has nothing to do now. The people from the Ocean Bureau will be responsible for the aftermath. After returning to New York, Qinzyu returned the yacht and did not go to the hotel, but followed Christine directly to her small villa. Where's Shirley? After entering the house, Qinzyu was a little disappointed that he did not find the little girl rushing towards him as expected. Today is not the weekend, she should have gone to school. Hearing Qinzyu's words, Christine took out her mobile phone and called the nanny while changing her shoes. After making sure that Shirley had arrived at school safely, Christine hung up the phone and said with a smile, Since Shirley recovered from her illness, I found a school nearby for her. She can't not go to school. Indeed, the girl is old enough to go to school. Qinzyu nodded gently and was about to say something, but suddenly remembered that Shirley had never been to school, and he couldn't help but worry again. Chris, have you been to the school? Can the little girl adapt? Don't worry. Christine came to Qinzyu and sat down. I went to see her secretly a few times. Shirley is much more cheerful now and has good popularity in school. That's good. Compared with Christine's concern for Shirley, Qinzyu suddenly felt that he was a little irresponsible. Although Shirley was not his child, Qinzyu did treat this girl as his own child. What was the result? Facts have proved that he is indeed not suitable to be a father at the moment. As if she had noticed Qinzyu's thoughts, Christine put her small hands on his big hands and changed the subject. Clean, should we go to the insurance company to watch them? What if they don't pay? No, they will transfer the money after they confirm the situation. Qinzyu, who had already had this experience, didn't take Christine's worries seriously and said with a smile, Unless they don't plan to work in the insurance industry anymore, they won't dare not pay. Really? That's good. Christine just asked casually. She knew as much about insurance companies as Qinzyu did. Seeing that her goal had been achieved, she couldn't help but laugh. Clean, I guess no one will dare to accept your insurance in the future. It's only been a short time, and you've bankrupted 2 insurance companies. Can you blame me for this? He smiled bitterly and sighed. If possible, Qinzyu would rather not have the compensation from the insurance company. Although there would be no loss of money, time would be wasted. Christine was of course aware of this. Thinking of Qinzyu's several high-end restaurants that had been built or were about to be built, her beautiful brows could not help but frown. What are you going to do in the future? Are you going to buy another fish farm? I have this idea. Qinzyu nodded. If the fish farm is really unusable, I can only buy another one. Without good raw materials, it's useless to open a restaurant. Can't we just buy other people's catches? Christine was a little confused. In this way, the cost should be lower than opening a fish farm by ourselves, right? Cost is not the most important thing. Qinzhou waved his hand and said with a smile, I don't feel safe using fish raised by others. The standards are not met. Looking at Qinzhou's serious expression, Christine rolled her eyes, thinking that this guy was joking, but she didn't know that Qinzhou really looked down on the fish raised in other people's fish farms. I don't know if the system fish farm can prevent pollution. Thinking of this, Qinzhou's eyes lit up a little, looked at Christine beside him, and rolled his eyes. Chris, I'm a little sleepy, do you want to go to catch up on some sleep together? Catch up on some sleep? Christine was stunned for a moment, and then rolled her eyes at Qinzhou unhappily. You're tired, go to sleep by yourself. It's broad daylight, and I have things to do. I don't have time to play with you. Really not going? No. Okay, I'll go by myself then. Qinzhou sighed, pretending to be disappointed, and stood up and walked upstairs. Humph, you think about bad things all day long, so I can't spoil you. Looking at Qinzhou's back, Christine waved with a smile, you go to sleep first, I'll call you when lunch is ready. Qinzhou, who successfully found an excuse to escape back to the room, did not waste time and directly transferred his consciousness to Cheese. He was now eager to test whether his system was so powerful. Fortunately, Cheese was near the fishing ground in the morning, and it only took a few minutes to reach the place where the tanker sank. This is already a deep-sea area, and the sea level is at least more than 300 meters away from the seabed. At this moment, the unfortunate tanker has sunk to the bottom of the sea and is lying on the seabed. Still leaking. How much oil is in this tanker? When he came to the front and looked at the steel tanker that was constantly gushing out black oil, Qinzhou suddenly found a very serious problem. He didn't even ask Stella how much oil was in this tanker. It has been 2 or 3 hours since the accident, and the oil in this tanker has not leaked out yet. However, now is not the time to tangle with this. Qinzhou shook his sturdy body and swam around the tanker, trying to feel the difference in the surrounding seawater. However, after feeling it for a long time, he didn't feel any difference. Could it be that the harm has not yet appeared? After thinking about it, Qinzhou swung his tail and swam towards the inside of the fishery. Since he couldn't feel it, he would find some that could feel it. He randomly found a group of sea fish, and Qinzhou controlled his huge body to drive them near the tanker. As a result, he found that these guys were not uncomfortable at all. Is this system really that powerful? Qinzhou quietly floated to the sea surface covered with oil, and he was puzzled. He was not sure whether the harm of pollution had not yet appeared or his system was really that powerful. Forget it, let's come back and check in 2 days. Shaking his head, Qinzhou collected his thoughts. He wanted to go downstairs to see what Christine was doing, but he felt sleepy and fell asleep. Ding-ling-ling, the harsh ring of the phone broke the silence of the early morning. Qinzhou, who was immersed in his sleep, sat up with all his strength. These days are very busy. Although he didn't know who called, he couldn't pretend not to hear it. Clean, I received some very bad news. You have to be mentally prepared. Director Stella? Hearing the familiar voice on the other end of the phone, Qinzhou was stunned for a moment, then smiled and said, just say it if you have anything to say. I think I can bear it well. In that case, I'll say it straight. Stella sighed, sorted out her emotions, and then said, we just received a report that Lin Ted, the owner of Deb Twain Insurance Company, is missing. What? Si est escuchando esta novela en un canal distinto a mundo fanfic novelas, significat lo descarga and y subieron sin esfuerzos invitamos cordialmente a visitar nuestro canal. Mundo fanfic novelas all encontrás la versión original de esta historia y podrás explorar muchas otras novelas de diversos narradores. Te esperamos para sumergirte en un mundo de novelas incredibles. Chapter 1068. Absconding with the money. Creaky, the silver grey Maybach stopped steadily in front of the Revere police station. The door opened, and Qinzhou walked down with Christine, who looked a little stunned. Clean, what did you say just now? The boss of the insurance company ran away. Christine suspected that there was something wrong with her ears. Didn't she say yesterday that the compensation had been calculated? Why did he run away today? Listening to Christine's question, Qinzhou smiled bitterly and shrugged. If Stella didn't fool me, then it should be like this. Although it was said on the phone that he was missing, at this critical moment, everyone knew what it meant. At this moment, 3 days have passed since the tanker ran aground. Although the people at the Marine Environment Agency have been salvaging the crude oil floating on the sea, pollution is still inevitable. In the past 2 days, Kinzu has also reached an agreement with the insurance company that the losses caused by the Tycoon fishery in this accident will be borne by the insurance company. After a series of calculations, they finally came up with an accurate number. $380 million. That's right, 380 million. Why is there so much money? Because according to the results of the investigation by the Ocean Bureau, the Tycoon fishery is not only seriously polluted, but also impossible to raise fish in the future. The compensation is mainly for the subsequent development of the fishery. For this point, it is meaningless for both Kinzu and the insurance company. Although the insurance company will definitely go bankrupt if it pays 380 million, they have to pay in black and white. But Kinzu never thought that when he had the certificate opened and signed, and was waiting for the money to arrive, the boss of the insurance company ran away. Clean, you are here. In the police station, Stella, who was about to take people out, stopped immediately when he saw Kinzu and the others coming in, and waved to his men to leave first, and then greeted Kinzu. Let's talk in my office. Following Stella to the office on the 3rd floor, Kinzu just sat down and asked impatiently, Director Stella, some things may not be explained clearly on the phone just now. Can you say it again? Of course, this is my job. Nodding, Stella looked at Kinzu with some sympathy, sighed. Clean, this morning we received a report from Seth, the Deputy General Manager of Tycoon Insurance Company. Their company's boss Ted has not been to work for 2 days, and his cell phone cannot be reached. 2 days. Kinzu frowned. Have you gone to look for him? Yes. Stella nodded, reached out to pick up a piece of paper from the table and handed it over. According to the news from the customs, Lind left the country last night and his destination is a small country in Africa. Did he run away? Yes, and he absconded with the money. Stella shrugged. Seth said that the $380 million they raised to compensate you was also taken away by Lind. This guy is really not afraid of death. Kinzu shook his head with a wry smile. He didn't know what to say about this matter. 380 million, if he could run away, it would be fine, but if he was caught, it would be really over. Decades of imprisonment are inevitable. As if she saw what Kinzu was thinking, Stella shook her head with a wry smile. Although I don't want to admit it, I have to say that it's very difficult to catch this guy again. In fact, Kinzu knew it was difficult without Stella saying it. After all, the place the guy went to was not an ordinary place. If Lind ran to big countries like Britain or France, the chance of being caught back was still very high. But Africa, let alone whether they can catch him, it is estimated that there are not many policemen willing to go there to handle the case. If he runs away like this, Tycoon Company will definitely be finished, and we would probably have no hope of getting the compensation. Kinzu sighed, not wanting to talk about this matter anymore, and could not help but change the subject. Director Stella, have you asked about the situation of those islanders? What is the reason for the shipwreck? It would have been better if he didn't say it. When Kinzu said this, Stella, who was already having a headache, felt even more irritated. Those damn Japanese guys kept repeating the same few words over and over again. They ran aground just because they were not familiar with the route, and they didn't say anything else. Is that so? Kinzu frowned and thought for a while. Have you contacted their company? What does their company say about this matter? $380 million is not a small amount for Kinzu. Since the insurance company ran away, he must dig some money back from other places. However, before Kinzu could implement this idea, Stella killed it with a stick. Clean, we have also contacted the freight company. But they are also a small company, with only one tanker under its umbrella. After a pause, Stella didn't know what to say, but looking at Kinzu, he gritted his teeth and said, now the only tanker has run aground, and they are also going through bankruptcy procedures. Fuck. Holding a cup of coffee brought by the policewoman, Kinzu almost couldn't control his emotions and smashed the cup. He couldn't tell whether he was too unlucky or someone was playing tricks behind the scenes. Clean, calm down, we are still investigating this matter, maybe there is still hope. Seeing that Kinzu seemed a little excited, Stella hurried over, smiled bitterly and comforted him. I have reported this to Mr. Wesley, and see if the town can give you some compensation first. No, that won't do. Kinzu, who was originally a little speechless, heard this and quickly waved his hand. Stella, what does this have to do with the town? Even if they didn't catch the person, I can afford to lose this little money. That's what you said, But after all, this matter is, don't say it, Stella, I appreciate your kindness. Without waiting for Stella to continue, Kinzu stood up. If there is nothing else, I will leave first. After all, I still need to go to the fishery to see how to deal with it. Is that so? Well, I will notify you when there is any news here. Kinzu was leaving, and Stella couldn't keep him, so she had to stand up and send them to the door. After saying goodbye to the kind-hearted Stella, Kinzu got on the Maybach at the door and motioned Christine to drive to New York. Clean, didn't Stella just say that the town has compensation? Why don't you want it? On the way, Christine looked at Kinzu beside her with some curiosity. The loss this time was not small. In her opinion, every bit counts, and she really couldn't understand why Kinzu would not want it. Ha, do you think this money is so easy to get? Kinzu came back to his senses from his contemplation and curled his lips in disdain. Besides, how much compensation can Wesley give us? At most a few $100,000, but if something happens in the town, can we run away? Christine thought about it, and it seemed to be true. In fact, there was another reason that Kinzu didn't say. If it didn't matter, and no one gave Lint the green light, how could he run away from America quietly? Not to mention transferring so much money abroad. Although the town is not small, it is not big either. For some people, such things cannot be concealed. Chapter 1069 Give Up. Kinzu ended nowhere after returning to New York. He stayed at Christine's house and didn't go out. He ate, drank, defecated, urinated and slept all in the house. Christine saw Kinzu's performance and felt happy and distressed. She was happy that Kinzu could spend more time with her, but she felt distressed because of the $200 or $300 million that Kinzu lost. It must be said that more than $300 million is not a small amount at any time. Even for the CEO of a company with a market value of hundreds of billions, more than $300 million is not a small number. Clean, don't think too much. Sitting next to Kinzu, Christine leaned against him gently. We can earn back the money if we lose it, but if we get sick, it will be the end. Hearing Christine's resentful tone, Kinzu smiled and touched his head. How can it be so exaggerated? I was just thinking about some things these 2 days, and now I have almost figured it out. Really? Christine expressed disbelief. Is it possible to sleep at home every day when thinking about things? Ahem, really, I promise. Facing Christine's concerned eyes, Kinzu had no choice but to raise his hand and promise God. He really didn't lie this time. During the few days he stayed at home, Kinzu controlled cheese and went around the fishery. He didn't even let go of the corners. After a few days of inspection, Kinzu finally confirmed one thing. That is, the oil spill incident did not cause as much harm to his Tycoon fishery as imagined. This discovery made Kinzu excited. He had heard some bad news in recent days. It was not easy to get good news. Kinzu was so happy that he didn't know how to celebrate. It was a pity that before he could share his good news with Christine, he was stunned by a call from Chen Mu. On the phone, Chen Mu's voice was very serious. Boss, the current situation is not good. Some media publicly questioned that the raw materials of our restaurant were contaminated. What do you mean? Kinzu, who was originally lazily leaning on the boss chair to bask in the sun, sat up directly. It's still about the fishery. Chen Mu sighed and explained. The pollution of the Tycoon fishery has become a big deal these days. The mainstream media has begun to worry about the raw materials of our restaurant. After all, the seawater is polluted like that, and they suspect that these fish are not clean either. What? Kinzu didn't know what to say anymore. He suddenly felt that the halo of pig's feet had expired. What's going on? An oil tanker ran aground on his own fishery, and then the boss of the insurance company ran away. When he finally confirmed whether there was an oil leak and how much loss it caused him, those hateful media suddenly came up with this. After these damn media propaganda, no matter whether his fishery has a problem or not, it is considered to be a problem by others. Besides, there is more than one restaurant in Boston. Since there are choices, why go to the problematic restaurant? Fuck. These damn guys, why did you forget about them? He scratched his hair in annoyance. The result that he had stayed at home for a few days to confirm became worthless at this moment. After hearing no sound from the other end of the phone for a long time, Chen Mu felt a little unsure. He didn't know what Kinzu was thinking. After a while, seeing that Kinzu had no intention of speaking, Chen Mu couldn't help but suggest, Boss, if our restaurant is going to continue, you should consider choosing a new fishery. Maybe, let me think about it. Although Qin Zhu didn't give a satisfactory result to Chen Mu, he didn't dare to say anything. He hung up the phone and continued to worry about the few remaining raw materials. In this season, good seafood is not easy to find. He is now saving as much as possible. Qin Zhu certainly didn't know what Chen Mu was thinking at this time, or even if he knew, he wouldn't take it to heart. Because he had been hit and had lost some confidence. Christine, do you think I should continue? Although Qin Zhu didn't say it clearly, could this stump Christine? Obviously not. As soon as Qin Zhu finished speaking, she reacted and stood up in astonishment. Qin, are you thinking of giving up? A little bit. Qin Zhu was not surprised that Christine could see through his thoughts. There is no hope here. Even if we change the fishing grounds, it will be too late for a while. Chapter 1070 Qin Zhu's plan. For Qin Zhu, there are only two options before him. Either give up the Tycoon fishery and find another fishery to supply the raw materials for the chain restaurant, or just give up the chain restaurant plan. These arrogant Westerners will not eat in a place where the raw materials are produced in a polluted place. Because it is related to their health. As for proving that their fishery is not polluted, who believes it? Not to mention the pollution certificate issued by the Ocean Bureau, just looking at the dark oil on the sea surface, no one will believe that the fish here are not polluted. It's really a headache. Sitting on the plane to Montana, Qin Zhu's face was full of melancholy. If possible, he really wanted to save the Tycoon fishery again. After all, it was his first industry after coming to the United States. But now that it has been exposed by these unscrupulous media, let alone saving it, it would be good if the chain restaurant was not involved. Although Chen Mu didn't say it clearly on the phone, his meaning was already very clear. If the raw material supplier is not changed quickly, the popularity accumulated by the chain restaurant recently will be in vain. However, Qin Zhu was still a little hesitant about this. Qin, you don't have to worry too much. Christine, who was leaning against the window to enjoy the scenery, seemed to sense something. She turned her head and gently placed her jade hands on Qin Zhu's big hands. Dub is helping you find the fishery. There will be news in 2 days at most. Don't worry. Ha, that's not what I'm worried about. Qin Zhu smiled and shook his head after coming back to his senses. Acquiring a fishery is just a small matter. Even without Doug's help, it wouldn't be too difficult for him to acquire a fishery. As long as he has enough frankling, let alone one fishery, even acquiring 10 fisheries would not be a difficult task. The reason why he was still a little hesitant was that he was still not sure whether the fish raised in a new fishery would have some special properties. You know, the reason why his chain restaurant business is so popular is largely related to the raw materials. No matter how good the chef is, without the best raw materials, he can't make delicious food. However, if he told Christine these things, she wouldn't understand, so Qin Zhu simply changed the subject. By the way, Gary, you didn't tell Shirley. The little girl must be sad when she can't find you when she goes back, right? Who told you to leave so quickly? It would be fine if she didn't say this. When Qin Zhu said this, Christine couldn't help but think of Shirley, who was still in school, and her expression became a little melancholy. The more she stayed with this man, the more she didn't want to leave, especially now that Zhu Mengyo, her real girlfriend, was not here. If she didn't seize the time, she didn't know when she would be alone together again. Well, I have something to do. Touching his nose, Qin Zhu explained a little embarrassedly, and he also found that he failed to change the topic. Fortunately, Christine was not one of those ignorant little girls, and she didn't continue to dwell on this issue, which made Qin Zhu relieved. After returning to the Montana ranch, Qin Zhu was not idle, but directly called Commis, who had already returned to the ranch. Boss. Commis, dressed in military uniform, came to the living room and called a little stiffly. Facing the billionaire, his boss, alone, Commis was still a little nervous. Sit down, you're welcome. Waving his hand, Qin Zhu motioned Commis to sit down. After a few pleasantries, he asked, Commis, I have a task here. I need you to go abroad to help me find someone. Can you do it? Find someone? Commis was stunned for a moment. He has been working in the bodyguard industry for several years, but he has never accepted such a task. Although he felt it was a bit difficult, he looked up at Qin Zhu and nodded affirmatively. Who would think that the US dollar is hot these days? He had reason to believe that as long as he could complete this task, this generous boss would not let him down. Boss, do you have the specific information of this person? Of course. Seeing Commis nodded and agreed, Qin Zhu suddenly smiled. Commis, I will give you the specific information later. There is only one request, find him and bring him back alive, understand? I will try my best. Thomas did not promise anything. Finding someone is not like protecting someone or killing someone. This thing is purely based on luck. Qin certainly understood this, and he did not force him to find that person within a few days, but asked him to act as soon as possible. As soon as Thomas was sent away, a silver bell-like laughter sounded at the door, and two figures walked in one after the other. The voice came before the person arrived. Before Qin had time to speak, Mobika's complaint with a hint of anger sounded. Qin, you didn't tell me in advance that you're back. If we hadn't seen Sister Gary, we wouldn't have known you're back. Well, isn't it a bit urgent to come back? Touching his nose, Qin also knew that Mobika was not really angry, so when she and Onid came to him, he directly pressed them down on the sofa with one hand each. Girls, I'm warning you, don't let anyone trick you into bed again, or you'll have your butts hurt. Although Qin didn't say it directly, how could Mobika and Onid not understand what he said? Their pretty faces turned red for a moment, not knowing how to refute. Christine, who followed in from behind, couldn't help but think of the ridiculous things she had done before, and her pretty face turned red as well. However, she was not the kind of person who would be bullied, so she couldn't help but refute. Humph, it's my ability to trick people into bed, and you can also trick them if you have the ability. Do I need to trick them? After taking advantage of Mobika and Onid, Qin sat up and said with a smug look on his face, I can get you into bed without tricking you. If I did, would we still be able to live here? Christine rolled her eyes and ignored the smug Qin, but pulled Mobika and Onid aside to talk in private. Seeing this, Qin's smile became even bigger. Without Zumengyo watching him, he found that he was indeed much bolder. Not only did he bring Christine back with Mobika and Onid around, but he was also able to be honest with them. However, Qin did not think that this situation meant that he did not love Zumengyo, but proved that he really cared about her feelings. Of course, Qin could only think about these in his heart. If he dared to say it out loud, not to mention what Zumengyo would think, even the women in front of him would probably have opinions about him. After all, they are also living people with flesh and blood, and have their own thoughts. Chapter 1071 The Sucker. Hey, Qin, I have good news and bad news. Which one do you want to hear first? Early in the morning, Qin just came back from exercising outside and received a call from Douglas. Listening to the slightly smug voice on the other end of the phone, Qin thought for a while and said with a smile, Doug, if I say I don't want to hear either, will you feel embarrassed? As if he didn't expect Qin to say that, Douglas paused for a moment and muttered a little depressed. Qin, you can't do this. This is not in line with the character of you Chinese people. Really? I don't think so. Shrugging her shoulders, Qin sat down on the sofa and let Mobika help her wipe the sweat off her forehead. Damn, Qin, can't you cooperate? Douglas felt a little crazy. How could this guy play so unconventionally? Okay, I'll cooperate. Qin pouted helplessly. Although Qin didn't want to play such a childish game with Douglas, he still cooperated reluctantly for the good news he mentioned. Ha, that's right, then I'll tell you the good news first. Douglas grinned, and was very satisfied with Qin's cooperation, so he began to talk about the good news he got today. In fact, it was good news, but it was also what Qin expected, that is, Doug had helped him find several fisheries near Boston, waiting for him to choose. So fast? How big are the areas? Although he guessed this, when Douglas said it, Qin still pretended to be surprised. Ha, Qin, don't worry about this, the area is definitely larger than your Tycoon fishery. Hearing Qin's exclamation, Douglas' vanity was very satisfied, so he began to introduce the situation of several fisheries in detail. The first fishery is located in the northwest of Boston, in a small town called Slacker, and the area is not as large as the Tycoon fishery, only more than 300 square kilometers. The second fishery is located in the southwest of Boston, a fishery called Brook, and the area is about the same as the Tycoon fishery, about 600 to 700 square kilometers. As for the third fishery, it is a bit far away, at the edge of Boston, but it is also the largest, covering more than 1,200 square kilometers, almost twice the size of the Tycoon fishery. The price is not cheap, right? Listening to Douglas's introduction, Qin couldn't help but frowned. He didn't have much cash now. After investing $1 billion in the aircraft manufacturing plant and transferring $100 million to the hotel chain for their expansion, Qin only had $200 to $300 million in cash. He originally hoped to get some compensation from the insurance company, but the guy ran away, causing Kinzu to lose another 200 to 300 million US dollars. Now if he wants to acquire a fishery that is twice as large as the Tycoon fishery, Kinzu doesn't know if his cash is enough. Of course, Clean, this is the bad news I want to tell you today. After a pause, Douglas's relaxed tone disappeared, replaced by a voice of gloating. Due to the media's extensive coverage, you are now a celebrity in Boston, and according to the analysis of those well-known people in the media, you're in urgent need of acquiring a fishery. What? Kinzu was stunned when he heard this, and then he had a bad premonition in his heart. Doug, how did those guys know that I wanted to acquire a fishery? Did you leak it? Fuck, why would I leak such news? Douglas seemed a little exasperated at Kinzu's suspicion. Such a thing can be known by anyone who is not stupid. Why do we need to leak it? Kinzu calmed down and knew that this guy was telling the truth, but he still couldn't accept the fact that he had become a fat sheep. Doug, tell me what your bad news is. Did they offer a sky-high price? No. Sitting on the soft leather seat, Douglas slowly turned around. Clean, although it's not a sky-high price, except for the small fish farm, the unit prices offered by the other two are almost the same. Oh? Kinzu narrowed his eyes. What do you think? The first fish farm, because the area is not too large, and there is no place to build a dock, the fish farm owners offer is 22 million US dollars. 22 million? Kinzu frowned slightly, and was somewhat unacceptable to Douglas's cheapest offer. Isn't this too low? More than 300 square kilometers of fish farms, the offer is only 22 million US dollars, what a joke. This is equivalent to a 1 square kilometer fish farm, and it only costs 70,000 US dollars. Clean, don't be too happy too soon. As if knowing what Kinzu was thinking, Douglas smiled and said, since I said this is bad news, it can't be good news. Oh? Kinzu thought about it and it was true. Since Douglas said it was bad news, it didn't make sense that there would be such a good thing. Then tell me, what happened to this fishery? Why is the price so low? It's simple. This fishery still owes the bank more than 70 million yuan in loans. If it wants to continue operating, it must pay off the loan first. Next, rolling his eyes, Kinzu muttered unhappily, Doug, if you don't finish your words next time, I'm going to travel to the British Empire tomorrow. Hey, man, don't get excited. Douglas, who was planning to continue to tease Kinzu, immediately became timid when he heard this. Travel to the British Empire. I'm afraid that this guy will lose all his plane orders after a trip. The reason why Douglas teased Kinzu like this today was just because he was a little unhappy that his cousin treated him as an errand boy. He didn't want to ruin his career because of this momentary dissatisfaction. Clean, there's nothing wrong with the second fishery. The location is not bad either. But the price is higher than the average fishery. We're asking for 200 million US dollars. 200 million? What about the third one? The price of the third one is even higher. Not only is the location remote, but the asking price is as high as 480 million US dollars. Are these guys crazy about money? Kinzu was a little helpless. These fishery owners didn't look like they wanted to sell the fishery. He remembered that the original estimate of his Tycoon fishery was less than 100 million US dollars. The area was not much different. How could they have the courage to ask for 200 million? Ha, they're not crazy about money. They just know that you will definitely buy that fishery. Listening to Kinzu's helpless complaint, Douglas laughed. Who let the media rip you off these past 2 days and be so sure that you're definitely going to buy a fish farm? Plus, there are only 3 fish farms in Boston that meet the requirements, so it would be strange if they didn't raise the price. They can't raise the price that much, right? It's doubled the price. Although Kinzu knew this was the truth, he still couldn't accept it. Doug, let's talk about the fish farm later. I don't want to be taken advantage of. Chapter 1072 The little guys who have changed so much. After hanging up Douglas's phone call, Kinzu ate the breakfast carefully prepared by Mobica while thinking about what to do now. It would definitely not be appropriate to purchase a new fishery now. He had the money, but he couldn't be a sucker. In addition, he didn't know whether the Tycoon fishery was polluted. It was good that the fish were not dead, but he had never checked whether the fish meat had deteriorated. However, even if he went to check, it would be useless. The Americans could not believe that healthy fish could be raised in your polluted sea area. But if he gave up like this, he would not be willing to do it. The insurance company did not pay a penny. Giving up the fishery meant that Kinzu's more than 100 million US dollars was completely wasted. I hope this guy Comus can give me a surprise. Kinzu sighed softly. Although he knew that it was a bit unreliable to pin his hopes on Comus alone, he had no other choice now. He also left Linktra in New York to protect Chain Mew, and Dale was responsible for his safety and couldn't leave. At present, he could not mobilize many people except for the team at Comus. After all, Yoshinoya was still eyeing him covetously. If they were to attack suddenly, it would be dangerous if no one protected him. Ouch! Just when Kinzu was immersed in his thoughts, he suddenly felt a white shadow flashing in front of him, and a big meatball suddenly appeared on his feet. Ah, Betty! Kinzu came back to his senses and pushed the little brown bear that was climbing on his legs aside, and said in amazement, "Little guy, you have grown taller again." Indeed, Betty used to be able to stand up at most to Kinzu's thighs. I didn't expect that after not seeing it for a while, this guy was almost up to his thighs when he was lying down. It seems that your stepmother didn't treat you badly. Glancing at Mobuka who was busy in the kitchen, Kinzu looked a little guilty. After all, they were hired by Chain Mew. I didn't expect that they didn't do any serious work but came to serve me. Woof, woof, it seemed that Betty was leading the way. The little guys who were playing outside rushed into the living room. Hey, guys, let's go out first. Kinzu was anxious when he saw that the floor that had just been mopped was trampled by these guys. This was just mopped by Christine. If she found out, these guys would be in trouble. While there was no one in the living room, Kinzu dragged Betty out and waved to Daha and Shiaha. The two guys immediately rushed out with their friends. Good guys, is the food good recently? Kinzu was so anxious that he didn't look carefully. When he arrived at the door and let these guys squat on the lawn, he was immediately shocked. Daha and her, needless to say, they have just turned 1 year old and their bodies have fully grown. Now, let alone ordinary huskies, even their ancestors, the Siberian wolves, are not as big as them. However, this is not what surprised Kinzu the most. What really surprised Kinzu were the two little white tigers. Well, although their fur color is not pure white, these are not the most important. The important thing is the size of these two little white tigers now. I thought that the two huskies could grow so big, which was already a gifted talent, but I didn't expect that these two little white tigers were not bad at all. More than 1 meter tall and more than 3 meters long. If Kinzu hadn't seen the white tigers had no hostility towards them, he would even have the urge to turn around and run away. It's not that he hasn't seen the world, but the scene in front of him was too shocking. What would you think if 2 more than 3 meter long tigers were circling around you? Fortunately, with the existence of a pet contract, Kinzu was not worried that these guys would suddenly bite him. Of course, Kinzu was also confident in his reaction ability. He believed that even if such a thing really happened, he would be able to react in the first time. Compared with Daha and Dao, the image of Tom and Jack was a bit shabby. Just like in the movies, one is raised by his biological mother, and the other is raised by his stepmother. Not to mention growing up, Kinzu felt that these two guys seemed a little thin. Come here, come to me. Kinzu waved at Jack and signaled him to come over with his wife. He was a little worried that the two guys were sick. After receiving Kinzu's call, Jack, who was squatting on the backs of Daha and Dao, jumped to Kinzu with Tom in a few steps, chattering non-stop, as if expressing something. Unfortunately, Kinzu didn't understand a word. The little guy is not thin. Although he didn't look like he had much meat, Kinzu pinched him with his hand and found that Jack was full of flesh and almost fat. Clean, did you notice it too? Mobuka, who had just finished cleaning the kitchen, walked out of the villa and saw Kinzu holding little Jack up and down, and couldn't help but come over. The appetite of these two little guys has increased a lot recently, but their bodies seem to be getting thinner and thinner. Are they sick? Sick? No, Kinzu was shocked when he heard this. He quickly picked up little Jack and looked around. Then he shook his head and said, "They look so energetic, they don't look sick. But they eat too much." Mobuka gestured with her hand and said in disbelief, "These two little guys can eat such a large bowl of nuts in one meal. The total weight is heavier than their bodies. How can their stomachs bear it?" This, Kinzu was also a little undecided. At present, there is indeed a problem with their appetite, but no one stipulates that being able to eat is a disease. After hesitating for a while, Kinzu still shook his head. "Forget it, let's take a look first. If it doesn't work, call a veterinarian." "Yeah, that's what I think." Mobuka nodded in agreement. Although she really wanted to send these two guys to the veterinarian right now, she really couldn't find any problems. Abnormal. Except for eating more, there seems to be nothing abnormal. Uncomfortable. Eat and sleep, sleep and go crazy and continue eating, and they don't seem to feel uncomfortable. Forget it, let's observe for a while. After making up his mind, Mobika seemed to suddenly remember something, and his eyes suddenly lit up. Clean, come with me to the back, I have good news to tell you. Good news. Kinzu was stunned for a moment, as if he thought of something, and threw Jack on Daha's back and trotted after him. Not only that, his breathing became a little rapid, and his mind especially emerged with the pleasant exchange with Mobika in the woods last time. For me, this is indeed good news. Chapter 1073 Little Hairy Play. This is, following Mobika to a dense forest behind their villa, Kinzu's and lush claws were about to move, but he was stunned by the two little things that suddenly appeared in front of him. Ha! How is it? Surprise, right? Turning around, Mobika looked at Kinzu's astonished expression, his face full of pride. Indeed, it is indeed a surprise. Touching his nose, although the scene in front of him was a little different from what he imagined, Kinzu was indeed quite surprised. Because what appeared in front of him were two fledglings whose feathers had not yet grown. Yes, real fledglings. However, the two fatherless little birds are not the point is the two big birds guarding them on the left and right. Ha! Pape, you finally hatched the little guy. Walking forward, Kinzu touched Ha-Ha's little head with his big hand, his face full of smiles. Tick, enjoying Kinzu's touch, Ha-Ha's little eyes were also full of gratitude at this moment. If Kinzu hadn't rescued them from the group of Jindasha, not to mention the children, even the bodies of the couple would probably be gone. Therefore, Ha-Ha and Pape have always been very close to Kinzu and the people around him. Otherwise, let alone touching them, even getting close would be treated as an enemy. The maternal instinct of animals is still very strong. By the way, why did these two guys come here? Looking at the surrounding environment, Kinzu was a little confused. He remembered that the happy girl was always in the roofed oak garden, right? Clean, you don't know. When asked by Kinzu, Mobika was also a little confused, looking at Kinzu with a strange look. Sister Mingyo said that the second floor is too noisy, and people often come in and out. She was afraid of disturbing Ha-Ha and Pape, so she moved their nest to this forest. Is that so? That's good, that's good. Being stared at by Mobika with such a weird look, Kinzu was a little embarrassed, mainly because Mingyo hadn't told him about this trivial matter of changing the nest for the pet. Ahem, Kinzu would never admit that it was because he hadn't visited Ha-Ha and Pape for a long time. But it's okay. Looking at how comfortable Ha-Ha and Pape are now, it means that the new home Mingyo found for them is really suitable. Come to think of it, these guys originally lived in trees, and the garden on the second floor is indeed a bit small. As their bodies grow bigger and bigger, they can no longer move in the garden on the second floor. Kite-ji, as if they felt that they were ignored, the two little guys whose fur had not yet grown fully moved to the edge of the nest, and therefore little eyes stared at Kinzu curiously. Kinzu, who was originally planning to turn around and go back, looked up and saw the curious eyes of the two little guys, and an idea suddenly emerged in his mind. If they were fed with spiritual liquid from an early age, would the effect be better? Kinzu stopped and did it as he thought, and a smile of expectation appeared on his face. Come here, little guys, the master will give you something good. Kite-ji. To Kinzu's surprise, after hearing his words, the two little guys seemed to be frightened and took a few steps back, almost falling from the other end of the bird's nest. The smile froze on his face, and Kinzu's heart was filled with countless MMPs. Are you so disrespectful? Wait, this doesn't seem to be the point. After 2 seconds of being stunned, Kinzu suddenly came to his senses. Can these two guys understand what he said? Hey, little guy, can you understand me? Kite-ji, well, I don't understand bird language either. Kinzu scratched his head. Did this guy understand or not? Well, if you understand, nod your head. If you don't understand, shake your head, okay? Kite-ji, the little harpy eagle shook his head violently. Oh, you don't understand? Kite-ji, the little harpy eagle nodded quickly. Puchi. Mobika, who originally thought that Kinzu was just entertaining himself, couldn't help but giggle when she saw this. Clean, these two guys look like you. Like me. Kinzu pouted. Such a silly bird, how can it be like me? Why not? Mobika looked at him with a smile, as silly as you. Rolling his eyes, Kinzu slapped the perky part. I haven't dealt with you for a few days, you want to go to heaven, right? Humph pouted proudly, come if you have the guts. I. Just wait for me. Kinzu was a little depressed. Although he did plan to deal with this little goblin in the grove at first, after discovering that the little eagle could understand him, Kinzu lost interest in live broadcasting. He didn't want to teach a child bad things. Come, little guys. Kinzu picked up the little guys in one hand, and a sly smile appeared on his face. Don't be afraid, I'm not a good person. Kaiji, suddenly leaving the warm nest, the two little eagles were immediately frightened, and asked for help from their parents with pitiful eyes. Pape was a little anxious, waving his wings to Kinzu to take back the children, but he didn't dare to move his claws, so he could only look at Kinzu with pleading eyes. Haha was more confident in Kinzu. He didn't even move, and even whistled, signaling Pape to come back. Don't worry, I won't hurt them. Seeing that he caused Pape's misunderstanding, Kinzu also regretted it a little. Why did he scare the two little guys for no reason? But now that he had taken it out, Kinzu didn't hesitate anymore. He directly opened the system to exchange 2 drops of spiritual liquid, and while Mobika was not paying attention, he dropped a drop on each of them. Fortunately, this spiritual liquid does not have to be taken orally, otherwise Kinzu really had no way to get the 2 little guys to eat it. Looking at Pape's defensive look now, if Kinzu really dared to open his mouth to feed it, it would probably dare to move its claws. Alright, look at you cowards. After making sure that the spiritual liquid was completely integrated, Kinzu let go and put the 2 little guys back. Seeing them shrinking in Haha's arms aggrieved, he couldn't help but laugh and cry. Is this considered getting a bargain? After staying in the new eagle's nest for a while, seeing that the 2 little happy eagles had no adverse reactions, Kinzu took Mobika away. Clean, why do you feel that the little guys here are so smart? Walking on the path next to the villa, Mobika looked at the big hectares and the 2 hectares playing around, and asked thoughtfully, do you have any special way to make them smart? Oh? Kinzu's eyes shrank slightly, and then he smiled and said, why do you ask that? Because it's too unscientific. Mobika scratched his hair in confusion. If Daha and her are smart, it's because of long-term training, but now even 2 newly born birds are so smart, this is a bit abnormal. It's a bit abnormal. Kinzu nodded in agreement, which was also very strange to him. If you say other pets are smart, it's because they use spiritual liquid, but these 2 little guys can understand what they saw not long after they were born. Why is that? Chapter 1074 Return to New York. In the villa, Kinzu and Mobika stared at each other, not knowing what to say. Mobika thought Kinzu had a secret that he didn't want to tell her, and she was a little sad, but later she found that he really didn't know. And what about Kinzu? He wanted to tell Mobika about the spiritual liquid, but after thinking about it, the 2 little guys had never used the spiritual liquid at all, so how to explain it? After a stalemate, Mobika seemed to remember something and whispered, how about I take them for testing? Testing? Global was a little tempted, but thinking about Pape's panic just now, he shook his head. Forget it, let's talk about it when they grow up. If I take them away now, Haha and Pape will probably disagree. That's right. Thinking of the scene where Pape jumped directly from the tree just now, Mobika nodded in agreement. After talking about pets, Mobika put her mind at ease. She went to the kitchen to wash a basin of fruit and brought it out. She asked casually, by the way, Clean, how is the restaurant going now? Restaurant? Isn't it running normally? Kinzu picked up a plump black plum and took a bite. His brows couldn't help but frowned. It was a bit sour. I know it's running normally, but didn't Chen say that the raw materials are tight? Thinking of the call from Chen Mu yesterday, Mobika pouted. He said that the new restaurant will delay the opening hours. So Enkanon and I go to work. Delay? He didn't tell me. Putting down the bitten black plum in his hand, Kinzu took out his mobile phone and called Chen Mu directly. Boss, is it because of the delayed opening? When the call was connected, Chen Mu asked with a smile before Kinzu had time to speak. Yeah. Kinzu didn't deny it. He smiled and nodded. Tell me what you think. It's very simple. Chen Mu's voice was very confident. Since we are going to go the high-end route, we can't leave a bad impression on customers. Since we don't have enough raw materials now, we should open later. But in this case, won't the loss be too big? Kinzu felt a little sorry for his money. He didn't feel it before, but now he can't even afford to buy a fishery. If he doesn't find a way to make some money, he will probably have to borrow money to survive. Boss, it won't be too much loss. Chen Mu smiled and comforted. Only the two high-end restaurants will delay their opening. Other restaurants will operate normally. After all, their requirements for raw materials are not that high. Is that so? That's good. Relieved, Kinzu glanced at Mobica beside him and asked with a smile. By the way, I haven't asked you yet, how do you arrange Mobica's work? Although Kinzu also wanted to let the two girls accompany him on the ranch all the time, he also understood that it was basically impossible. Because of their personalities, they are destined to not be able to lie at home and do nothing. The reason why they stayed at the ranch for so long this time was mainly because something happened to Kinzu temporarily. Now that the matter has been resolved, they still want to go out to work. Chen was scratching his head when Kinzu asked this. He invited these two girls here to repay his master, Mobica's father, and wanted to open a high-end restaurant for them to train. But now the new store has not opened, and the old store is full of people, which is also a headache for him. As for those low-end restaurants, they are not even in Chen consideration. God knows if Kinzu will feel embarrassed after he transfers the boss's mistress over. What if he is unhappy and makes things difficult for himself, then the game will not make up for the loss. Brother Chen, you have to find a way to arrange this matter, I can't help you. Although he knew that Chen was a little embarrassed, looking at the expectant eyes of Mobica and Onid, Kinzu decided to die rather than die, and directly pressed the task over. They are now idle all day on the ranch, and they are almost bored to death. If you don't find something for them to do, you know the consequences. Okay, I understand. How could Chen not understand? Mobica's father is his master. When the little girl goes back to tell her father, won't she be bullying him? Kinzu didn't know how Chen was going to deal with it. Anyway, it was none of his business. After hanging up the phone, he looked at the two big horses beside him with expectation, and couldn't help but laugh and cry. Why do you want to go out to work so much? Isn't it good to stay here? Stay here. Mobica pouted, what about after Sister Mengyo comes back? Kinzu wilted with just one sentence. Yes, it's true that Zumengyo knew that he had a woman outside, but if this relationship was made clear and they were allowed to live together, what would be the consequences? Kinzu shuddered a little thinking about it. Zumengyo had a good temper, but that didn't mean she wouldn't lose her temper. Forget it, it's up to you. Shaking his head, Kinzu was a little entangled. When would he be able to do the kind of hugging left and right in the novel? Kinzu had to get busy after just 2 days of quiet time at the ranch. The Tycoon fishery is currently hopeless, so the site for the new fishery must be selected as soon as possible. Fortunately, there is good news. Yesterday, he went to the system to consult, and found that his worries were in vain, because as long as the fishery is under his name, it has the attributes of the system fishery. With this, Kinzu finally let go of the matter of the Tycoon fishery. After all, as long as delicious fish can be raised, it doesn't matter where it is. Clean, you are finally here. At the New York airport, Douglas, who came to pick up the plane, looked at Kinzu and Christine, who were holding hands and slowly coming out of the airport, with a smile on his face. Hey, little Gary, aren't you afraid of paparazzi? Although you have retired from the entertainment industry, there are still many people following you. Oh, so what? After looking around and finding that there were indeed many people taking pictures at her, Kristen not only did not retract her hand, but smiled and said, the eldest son of the Douglas group is allowed to spend his days in debauchery, but I am not allowed to find a boyfriend. Wiping the non-existent cold sweat on his forehead, Douglas waved his hand with a dry smile and decisively admitted his defeat. Let's not talk about this for now. Let's go. I'll take you back first. There was nothing he could do. Who made Kristen say it right? Compared with Kristen, who had already announced her retirement from the entertainment industry, he, the heir of Doug Industries, was obviously more likely to attract the attention of the paparazzi and tabloids. HMPH, Christine snorted, looking at Kinzu beside her, thought for a moment, and threatened. Doug, you'd better pray that there is no report about us tomorrow, otherwise I have a lot of good stuff here. Oh, fuck, your little bitch who values women over brothers. Douglas scratched his head in frustration, looked at Christine who looked serious, waved his big hand vigorously, and the bodyguards following behind him rushed out immediately. Clean, I swear, I will never come to pick you up at the airport again next time, absolutely not. Chapter 1075 Depressed Daily. Doug, do you mean that they agreed to lower the price? Sitting in the living room of Christine's villa, Kinzu held a cup of coffee and said with a funny face, I was just planning to go somewhere else to have a look, and I can't sit still. No, Clean, you're wrong. Douglas, who was sitting on the sofa opposite Kinsey, also laughed and raised his index finger and waved it gently. It's not that they can't sit still, but that they can't sit still. They? Kinsey touched his nose and seemed to understand a little. If you ask who would be the happiest about Kinsey's acquisition of the fishery, not the fishery owners, but the mayors of the towns where the fishery is located. Everyone knows that Kinsey will not leave the fishery idle after acquiring it. As long as it is not idle, it means a large amount of tax revenue. Maybe this amount of tax revenue is not valued by big cities, but it is really not a small amount for a small town. What do you mean? Kinsey did not agree directly, but threw the question back. You can go and have a look first, but it's best not to make a decision so quickly. Shrugging his shoulders, Douglas smiled and suggested, it doesn't matter where you buy it, as long as the price is right. Of course. Kinsey nodded, but I just don't like them. What should I do? The smile on Douglas's face froze, and he rubbed his face speechlessly. Clean, you are really not suitable to be a businessman. I didn't say I was a businessman. Kinsey laughed. Before, they knew I wanted to buy it, so they set a high price. Now that they see that I don't plan to buy it, they lowered the price again. How fun is that? Business is business, there's nothing wrong with this, right? Douglas was a little depressed. Isn't this how China does business? But I just don't like them. Kinsey spread his hands. Although they have lowered the price now, I just won't buy from them and make them regret it. Okay, in that case, I'll go and refuse them now. Douglas smiled helplessly. Although he didn't understand Kinsey's thoughts, he didn't say anything. After all, those guys had nothing to do with him. Clean, are you really not going to buy a fish farm near New York? After Douglas left, Christine came to Kinsey with a plate of fruit and asked curiously, I heard from Doug that the prices of those fish farm owners have been reduced by half, which is cheaper than the market price. No hurry, no hurry. Kinsey picked up the apple and took a bite. He then went to the sofa and put his feet on Christine's legs, feeling the amazing elasticity, and looked very comfortable. Before, we wanted to buy, now they want to sell. They are not in a hurry, so why should we be in a hurry? Oh? Christine was originally a smart woman. After hearing what Kinsey said, she understood and said with a smile, are you going to continue to lower the price? Will they agree? No. Kinsey curled his lips, if they don't agree, we can go to other places to buy, anyway, it's the same. For some reason, Christine suddenly began to sympathize with those fish farm owners. They bought it at a high price and you didn't sell it. Now it's okay, right? Kayla, they won't buy it at half price. In an office in Boston, 3 pot-bellied white old men sat together, 2 of them with happy smiles on their faces. How is it possible? Isn't he in a hurry to buy a fish farm? One of the old men with a mustache and wrinkles on his face put down his wine glass depressedly. This time he was shooting himself in the foot. When he first heard that Kinsey wanted to buy a fish farm, he was tempted. Kayla knows Chinese people very well. They either don't buy it, or once they buy something, they will want the best. His fishery is the largest in Boston and even in New York. He calculated that Kinsey would buy his fishery, so he joined forces with several fisheries to raise the price. After all, although his fishery is the largest and has the best cost-effectiveness, it is based on the premise that he does not raise the price. Once he raises the price and others do not, it is clear that Kinsey will definitely not want him. However, he never expected that he had just started to raise the price, and then there was news that Kinsey was not going to buy a fishery near New York. This made him depressed. In particular, the mayor of the town and the mayor of Boston were furious after knowing this, and almost found a reason to put him in. Moreover, he was given a dead task, either to sell the fishery or to use it himself. To put it bluntly, the fishery cannot be left idle there, it is too wasteful. Well, as a small businessman, and a small businessman who hoards land, Kayla really didn't dare to annoy those 2 damn politicians. With no other options, he contacted the person in charge of negotiating the price and directly reduced his offer by half. However, he did not expect that his offer would be revealed to other fishery owners by Douglas as soon as it came out. Now, he was the one who jointly raised the price, but others have raised the price, and you lowered the price again. What do you mean? Are you playing tricks on us, brothers? Kayla, who originally had a good reputation, suddenly became a bad name. As a result, the fishery owners who had never thought of raising the price, lowered their prices one after another. A good business was messed up like this. The remaining 2 fishery owners looked at Kayla with disdain, shook their heads and walked out. Although they also wanted to sell their fisheries, they were not so anxious. They would definitely not do it if the price was too low. Fuck, damn yellow monkey. After no one was in the office, Kaylee threw the wine glass in his hand and cursed with a sullen face. Forget about not buying it, you want me to continue to lower the price? No way. Clean, a fishery has reduced its offer by another 20%. Don't you want to consider it? On the other side of the phone, Douglas rubbed his head with a headache. He thought about how he, the eldest son of Doug Industrial Group, became a mouthpiece. And it was such a small business. But he had no choice, who let this be the task assigned to him by the dead girl Christine. Besides, he was also unhappy with those fishery owners. They didn't even give him face, so they deserved to bleed now. Another 20% reduction. There's nothing wrong with his fishery, right? Kinzu on the other side of the phone was a little surprised. Although the initial offer was high, it was not really twice as high. The last time it was directly reduced by half, it was already lower than the market price. Today, they are willing to reduce it by another 20%. Kinzu doesn't believe that pie will fall from the sky. There must be something he doesn't know about it. Ha, he has no choice but to sell it. Douglas couldn't help but laugh when Kinzu asked this. He was also surprised when he first got the news yesterday, so he went to investigate. He didn't expect that this guy named Kaylee was so unlucky. Chapter 1076. The pleasure of overwhelming IQ. Kinzu, who was still skeptical at first, had only one sentence in his mind after listening to Douglas' explanation. This is really a case of not asking for death or dying. However, this result is a happy one for him. Half of 480 million is 240 million. Even if we deduct 20%, it will be more than 190 million. After doing some calculations, Kinzu raised his lips. Doug, just tell him that I only have 180 million now. Either make a deal or change to another company. God, I take back what I said yesterday. Douglas also felt a little sympathetic to the unlucky guy. Clean, you are such a profiteer. Thank you for the compliment. Kinzu curled his lips. He didn't care about Douglas's ridicule at all. He believed that if the guy came to negotiate, he could directly lower the price to 150 million. What? He only has 150 million? After receiving Douglas' call, Kaylee almost suffocated. The fishery itself is worth about 250 million, but that damn guy is only willing to pay 150 million? Mr. Carey, don't get excited. Douglas, who was holding the phone, smiled wickedly, but his voice was as serious as ever. Everyone knows that the competition in fisheries is getting more and more fierce, and it is becoming less and less profitable. Many people can't sell the fish they raise. I believe that except for us, no one will come to buy your fishery that covers 1,200 square kilometers. But your price is too low, isn't it? Carey scratched the few golden hairs left on his head in a somewhat decadent manner. If it were normal times, 150 million wouldn't even buy half of my fishery. Ha, you also said that. That's normal times, isn't it? Douglas didn't refute, but smiled and said, in addition, according to the information I got, this fishery is not owned by you alone. You should go back and discuss it with your partners first. How do you know? Carey was shocked and stood up from the sofa. Fuck, do you know the consequences of investigating other people's privacy? Oh, Mr. Carey, don't get excited. Douglas whistled softly and said with a smile, I'm not interested in investigating the background of a small person like you. I just heard about it by accident when I was having dinner with him. His body froze in place. Carey, who was originally a little angry, was instantly soaked in cold sweat. Someone who can have dinner with the big boss behind the scenes? At this time, he realized that he seemed to have overlooked something. Hey, what's your name? Hey, just call me Douglas. Douglas showed a strange smile at the corner of his mouth. He didn't expect that he would get such useful information when he was having fun with his friends yesterday. Douglas, Carey frowned as he muttered to himself. He always felt that this name was familiar, but after thinking for a long time, he couldn't remember which Boston giant said Douglas. Wait. Suddenly, Kaylee thought of a piece of gossip he had heard before, that Keen from China had a good relationship with the eldest son of the Douglas family, an American industrial giant. Though, Douglas family? Kaylee couldn't help but exclaimed. He could never have imagined that the eldest son of the Douglas family would call him to discuss business. What? You don't believe it? Douglas was a little unhappy. How could it be? I'll go and discuss it with the boss. Kayla, who had been somewhat confident, bent his waist in an instant, his heart full of regret. He knew that he was completely finished. So, what you mean is that this fishery with an area of 1,200 square kilometers was bought by us for 150 million? Kinzu looked at Douglas with a strange look in his eyes. He thought that his offer of 180 million was dark enough, but he didn't expect that this guy was even more ruthless than him. 150 million, although it is not a lot of money, but if you can really buy that fishery, you can make at least 50 million. Haha, you can't blame me for this, I can only say that guy is too unlucky. Douglas ignored Kinzu's strange look, and instead said with some gloating, "You don't know how unlucky that guy is. 180 million was originally the reserve price of that fishery, but I ended up meeting the boss behind the scenes." Huh? The boss behind the scenes? Kinzu was a little curious. So the guy is not the boss of this fishery? Of course not. Douglas curled his lips in disdain. Have you ever seen a fishery boss who is so stupid? He can think of doubling the price. Then why didn't you see it before? Kinzu looked at him with some contempt. Ahem, didn't you pay attention to it at the time? Douglas was a little embarrassed, touched his nose, and quickly changed the subject. Clean, do you know why that guy raised the price? Why? It's just for money. After knowing that Kaylee was not the boss behind the scenes, Kinzu instantly figured out the matter. It was nothing more than that Kaylee himself didn't want to sell the fishery, but the boss behind the scenes wanted to sell it. In order to make some profits in the end, or to prevent Kinzu from buying the fishery in disguise, Kayla took the initiative to unite several fishery owners and raised the price. Huh? Douglas looked at Kinzu with some surprise, and didn't care about his face anymore, and asked curiously, "Clean, then tell me, how do I know that this guy is not the owner of the fishery? Isn't this even simpler?" Kinzu looked at him with amusement. After the boss behind the scenes knew about this, he must have been a little anxious. First, he was afraid of offending you, and second, he really wanted to sell the fishery, so he took the initiative to contact you, right? God, how did you know? Looking at Kinzu in amazement, Douglas turned and looked at Christine beside him. Did you tell him? What does it have to do with me? Christine, who was concentrating on browsing Twitter, looked up blankly when she heard the words, "Doug, have you told me about this?" "Well, I don't think so." Scratching his head, Douglas didn't know what to say. He felt a serious sense of frustration now. He ran over excitedly early in the morning. His original intention was to show off his influence in front of Kinzu, but he ended up being shown off. This is simply an IQ crush. Okay, let's not talk about this. You haven't said when the deal can be made. Seeing that Douglas seemed to be hit, Kinzu and Christine looked at each other and decisively changed the subject. "Oh, deal, wait, I'll confirm with him later." Douglas was stunned for a while before he realized that he hadn't agreed yet. He just wanted to talk about the price first. "Then why don't you hurry up?" Kinzu didn't know what to say. Usually this guy looked so smart, why was he so stupid today? Was he switched? Chapter 1077. Fishing ground acquired. Although he had doubts about Douglas's intelligence, Kinzu still recognized his ability to do things. Just 2 days later, the fishery with a total area of 1,235 square kilometers was transferred to the name of Tycoon Fishery. "Boss, are you sure you don't want to separate this fishery?" Chen Mu, who heard the news, called to congratulate him and reminded him, "It's better not to use the Tycoon Fishery sign for now, after all, the limelight has not passed." However, Kinzu refuted Chen Mu's suggestion. "Brother Chen, you have to know that sometimes avoiding the problem cannot solve the problem. Even if we change the name, won't others know? Will the media let go of this news?" Although he wanted to deny it, Chen Mu had to admit that those who disliked Kinzu would definitely dig out this fishery and expose it. In that case, what's the difference between being independent and not being independent? Kinzu smiled and said, "To be independent, you still need to register a company. It's not a big deal." "Okay, I don't have any objections." The big boss has made up his mind. What's the use of his opinion? The next day, early in the morning, when Kinzu was still immersed in Christine's tenderness, his cell phone suddenly rang. "Boss, it's just as you expected." The call was from Chen Mu. He thought that even if they didn't change their names, the media should not know about their private transactions. But when he opened today's newspaper, he was surprised to find that the news about Kinzu almost occupied the entire page. Of course, the most eye-catching part was the news that Kinzu had just purchased a giant fishery. "Haha, why are you so excited?" Rubbing his sleepy eyes, Kinzu stood up and leaned against the bedside. One big hand was playing tricks in the quilt, and the other hand was holding the phone, smiling. If I say that I let people leak all this information, would you be more surprised? What? Chen Mu stood up from the office chair suddenly, and he couldn't believe his ears. At this cusp, shouldn't we make a fortune quietly? Are we so high profile because we are afraid that the Americans will not boycott us? Calm down, Brother Chen, your tolerance is still a little weak. Listening to the exclamation from the other end of the phone, Kinzu was satisfied, and he didn't forget to tease this good subordinate who was busy working early in the morning. Okay, boss, I lost my composure. Taking 2 deep breaths, Chen Mu calmed himself down, and then asked, Boss, what are your plans? Do you need my cooperation? Of course I do. Kinzu smiled. He waited for a long time, wasn't it, just to talk to him about this? Otherwise, if you dared to disturb his sleep so early in the morning, he would have hung up the phone on you. Brother Chen, I remember that the Americans here always pay attention to tracing the source of everything. Let's do this for them too. Boss, what do you mean? Chen Mu seemed to understand Kinzu's meaning, but he was still a little unsure. After all, tracing the source is easy to say, but it is still difficult to do. Just as you think. Kinzu laughed. Brother Chen, just send a message to the public that every fish used in our restaurant, from being caught on the shore to being served on their tables, will have a video traceable. Every fish? Chen Mu frowned a little. How can this thing be traced? Can't it be numbered when they are caught? But in that case, how can we ensure that the quality of the fish meat is what they need? Yes, that's every fish. Kinzu nodded affirmatively. I will explain this to Will and the others. At most, we will hire a few more cameramen. They don't need to be very skilled and it won't cost much. Is that so? That's a solution. Seeing that Kinzu had thought of a solution, Chen Mu stopped talking. Anyway, they were not the first to do this. It was just replacing organic vegetables with sea fish. After hanging up the phone, Kinzu lit a cigar that Douglas sent yesterday and tried to take 2 puffs, but he choked and coughed. What the hell is this? After spitting several times, Kinzu put out the cigar and sighed. The main reason why he came up with such a solution was not to win the trust of consumers, but to prevent those guys from making trouble again. Kinzu didn't believe that they dared to make trouble in front of the camera. Forget it, let's go and see how Cheese is doing. After lying for a while, seeing that Christine didn't mean to get up, Kinzu turned his thoughts directly to Cheese. He has something very important to do today. Migration. That's right, migration. Yingguang and Cheese have basically controlled the large marine fish in the fishing grounds. They led the team to drive all the original marine fish in the Tycoon fishing grounds to the new fishing grounds. Are there any resistance? Of course there are. But Kinzu gave them a death order, and those who dared to resist were eaten directly, as if they were giving welfare. Now it's good, the large and small marine fish that were not very willing to work at first suddenly became excited. They have been greedy for these marine fish for a long time. There is no way, after being subdued by Yingguang and Cheese, they have no status in the fishing grounds. Not only can they not eat the marine fish in the fishing grounds, but they have to drive the marine fish they find from other places to the fishing grounds. In this way, although Kinzu did not throw in fish fry again, the rare marine fish in the Tycoon fishing grounds not only did not decrease, but there was a trend of increasing. Of course, after this migration, I don't know how many will be left. After patrolling around the school of fish, Kinzu felt relieved to find that the situation was not as bad as he had imagined. Just as he was about to pull his thoughts back, he saw that the school of fish not far away suddenly became agitated, and the tiger sharks following them also turned over several times. What's going on? Kinzu saw this and didn't care about going back. He shook his big body and jumped out with a force. Squeak! Before he arrived at the scene, Kinzu heard a familiar sound wave in his ears, and then the tiger sharks and great white sharks following him rushed straight past him. Huh. Kinzu was a little surprised. Yingguang, this guy, also knew how to deploy troops. He knew that Yingguang was still a long way behind him. How did he know how to command these great white sharks to rush over first? Although he was confused, Kinzu didn't have time to think carefully. After a few turns, he came to the center of the group of rioting sea fish. Good guys, are they preparing for a fight? Finde est capture much as great as Pelaga hasta el final. No se olviden dull like busgasms contenido exclusivo ixo inmediato. Si escravata news to Patreon. Recuerda, cada like, Sias groups in Odonakin nos anima are continued. Greaters a todos nos vemos en el próximo video.